Hey there, welcome back to the channel. If you're joining me for the very first time tonight, hello and a very warm welcome to you. I'm so glad you managed to find your way here to this quiet corner of the internet. And if you have been traveling with me for a while now, you already know what I always say at this exact moment. Pull that blanket just a little closer, settle deep into your bed, find that one perfect comfortable position on your pillow, and let the rest of the world drift away. Let me take you somewhere tonight, somewhere you have never been before, somewhere deep in the shadows of the past, somewhere that will make you feel a quiet, profound sense of gratitude for the ambient warmth surrounding you right now. Before we begin our journey into history, close your eyes for just a moment, just 10 seconds. Let your breathing slow down, inhale deeply and exhale slowly. Now, imagine this. You are 7 years old, the year is 1854, you wake up in the absolute dark. But this is not the soft, comfortable, protective dark of a modern bedroom. This is the kind of heavy, industrial dark that feels like it has a physical weight pressing down on your chest. You reach out your small hand into the darkness, searching for the familiar surface of the wall beside your bed. But when your fingers touch the brickwork, it is not dry, it is wet, not just damp, but truly wet, cold to the touch, like the interior stone of a deep subterranean cave. And somewhere beneath the thin, creaking floorboards, if you listen closely through the silence of the night, you can hear water, a slow, quiet, persistent trickle of water flowing through the darkness. This was not a house from a Gothic horror story. This was not a dwelling built to terrify anyone. It was just a regular home, a modest, ordinary brick home in an overcrowded neighborhood where millions of working-class families lived during the height of industrial Britain. The 19th century transformed the world forever. It brought majestic steam railways, massive textile mills, and an explosion of global trade that built empires, but behind the grand promises of progress and the wealth of industrial pioneers, there lay another reality. It was a reality lived by ordinary families who endured conditions that are difficult for us to fully comprehend today. Their homes were constantly cold, perennially damp, and almost impossible to keep warm, especially during those long, unforgiving winters in northern industrial towns. Tonight, we are not going to focus on the famous politicians, the wealthy factory owners, or the great historical battles. Instead, we are going to quietly step inside these modest homes. We will explore what it was truly like to grow up surrounded by damp walls, to breathe air thick with coal smoke, and to find comfort in the small, beautiful routines of family life, despite the harsh world outside. This educational documentary is carefully designed to guide you into a peaceful state of relaxation, letting the history of the past carry you gently into a deep, restful sleep. The channel, Sleepy History with Kevin, is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. To understand why these homes were so bitterly cold and persistently damp, we have to look beneath the surface of the brick and mortar. We must examine how these industrial towns grew and the architectural choices that shaped the daily lives of millions. As the factories and textile mills expanded at a breathtaking pace, thousands of families migrated from the green, quiet countryside into the booming urban centres like Manchester, Leeds, and Sheffield. They came looking for work, for a new future, but the towns were entirely unprepared for this massive influx of human souls. Land became precious, and every square inch of earth had to be converted into profit. This pressure gave birth to a specific type of working-class housing known as the back-to-back terrace. The concept was brutally simple and economically efficient for the builders. Imagine a row of narrow brick houses facing a tight cobblestone street. Each house consisted of just 1 or 2 rooms on the ground floor and 1 or 2 small bedrooms directly above. Now imagine another identical row of houses built directly behind the first row, sharing the exact same back wall. This meant that a single back-to-back house had only one external wall exposed to the outside air, the front wall. There was no backyard, there was no back door. Most importantly, there were no rear windows. Without windows at the back, there was absolutely no possibility of cross-ventilation. The air that entered through the front door or the small front window had nowhere to go. It did not circulate, it simply sat there, becoming heavy, stale, and thick with the moisture of everyday existence. Every breath drawn by the family, the steam from a rare pot of boiling water, the dampness of clothes hung up to dry after a rainy day at the mill, all of it remained trapped within those four narrow walls. Builders saved thousands of bricks by constructing homes this way, and landlords managed to squeeze double the number of tenants onto a single plot of land. But the human cost of this efficiency was paid every single day in cold drafts and stagnant air. The home, which should have been a sanctuary from the harsh industrial elements, became a vessel that collected and held the dampness of the British climate, locking it inside with the people who lived there. The dampness in these back-to-back houses was not a temporary nuisance that vanished when the sun came out. It was a structural, permanent resident of the building itself. In modern construction, builders use what is called a damp-proof course, a barrier made of impervious material built into the foundation walls to prevent moisture from rising from the ground. But in 19th-century working-class housing, such innovations were virtually non-existent. The bricks used to build these terraces were often cheap, locally made, and highly porous. They acted exactly like a hard red sponge, quietly drawing water up from the wet, unpaved earth beneath. This physical process, known today as rising damp, meant that the lowest few feet of the ground floor walls were constantly saturated with groundwater. But the moisture did not stop there. Rain soaked directly into the outer face of the brick wall during the frequent British storms. With no cavity between the exterior and interior walls, the water slowly but persistently travelled straight through the brickwork, appearing on the inside walls as cold, dark patches of penetrating damp. Wallpaper would simply refuse to stick to these walls. It would peel away in wet, mouldy strips. Even the plaster would crumble into a fine white dust over time, ruined by the constant presence of water. But there was another source of moisture that was perhaps even more profound. When the temperature dropped outside during the long winter months, the single-layered brick walls became ice cold. Inside, the family would gather, breathing, talking, and trying to generate warmth. When that warm, humid breath hit the freezing interior brickwork, it immediately turned back into liquid. The walls would literally begin to sweat. A child sitting near the wall in the evening could watch the tiny beads of water form, join together, and run down the wall in slow, silent streaks. There is a deeply poignant irony in this physical reality, the very warmth of the human beings inside the house. The one thing they had plenty of turned against them, transforming into the cold condensation that made their living spaces so uncomfortable. It was a cycle from which there was no easy escape, as the house itself seemed to breathe in the cold and sweat out the damp. If the ground floor of a back-to-back terrace was cold and damp, the cellar dwellings beneath them were far worse. In many industrial cities like Liverpool and Manchester, thousands of the poorest families lived entirely underground. These cellars were dark, windowless spaces where the floor was often nothing more than bare, packed earth or damp stone flags. When heavy rain fell upon the unpaved streets outside, the water would naturally drain downward, seeping through the foundation walls and collecting in stagnant puddles right beneath the beds where children slept. The morning routine in such an environment required an extraordinary amount of resilience. Long before the first pale rays of winter light could pierce the heavy smog covering the town, the mother of the household would be the first to stir. Waking up in a room where her own breath hung like a white cloud in the air, she would step onto the freezing floorboards. The air inside smelled of stale coal smoke, damp wool, and the bitter scent of moisture that had settled into every corner during the night. Her first task, and perhaps the most important one of the day, was to tend to the small iron grate that served as the fireplace. Coal was the lifeblood of industrial Britain, but for a working-class family it was an expensive commodity that had to be used with strict economy. She would carefully clear away the grey ashes from the previous evening, saving any tiny unburnt fragments of coal. With a few precious scraps of dry wood or old newspaper, she would strike a match, gently coaxing a tiny flame to life. As the small fire began to crackle, casting a warm, flickering orange glow across the damp-streaked walls, the rest of the family would begin to wake. The children, wrapped in worn blankets and woolen shawls, would huddle close to the small hearth, stretching out their small cold hands toward the fragile warmth. There was no running water inside the house. A single bucket fetched from a communal pump in the courtyard the night before would have to suffice. The water in the bucket would often have a thin layer of ice floating on top, which had to be broken before anyone could wash their face. Breakfast was a simple, quiet affair. There was no luxury of hot, varied dishes. Instead, it usually consisted of thick slices of bread spread with dripping, the rendered fat from beef or pork, and a mug of hot, weak tea sweetened with a bit of coarse brown sugar. This simple meal provided the essential calories the children needed before they wrapped themselves in their heavy coats and stepped out into the dark, foggy streets, walking toward the distant roaring sound of the textile mills where their long workdays awaited them. All stories on this channel, Sleepy History with Kevin, are fictional, thoughtfully crafted around historical themes and inspired by real events, figures and periods, reimagined for engaging storytelling. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events, or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, or events is purely coincidental. As the short winter afternoon dissolved into the grey twilight of the industrial town, the dampness inside the back-to-back house seemed to intensify. The small coal fire, which had been maintained with such care during the day, was allowed to die down to a faint glowing ember before the family went to bed. To burn coal through the night was a luxury that few working-class budgets could ever sustain. With the disappearance of the flame, the house quickly surrendered to the ambient freezing temperatures outside, and the true struggle for warmth began. In the small upstairs bedroom, space was just as scarce as heat. It was a universal reality of industrial working-class life that beds were almost always shared. A single narrow mattress, stuffed with straw or coarse flock, would often hold 3, 4, or even 5 children, placed top to tail to maximize space. While modern sensibilities might view this overcrowding as a hardship, to the children of the 19th century, it was a vital source of survival. The shared body heat of siblings was the most effective barrier against the biting cold that crept through the gaps in the window frame. The bedding itself was a patchwork of necessity. Heavy woolen blankets were expensive, so families used whatever materials they could find to pile onto the bed. Worn-out winter coats, old shawls, and heavy burlap sacks that had once held flour or potatoes were laid over the children. The weight of these accumulated layers was heavy, pressing down on their small bodies, but the warmth it trapped was precious. Yet even beneath this heavy pile, the dampness was an inescapable foe. Because the bedroom walls were constantly cold and wet with condensation, the edges of the blankets that touched the wall would gradually absorb the moisture, becoming damp and clammy by the early hours of the morning. A child lying at the edge of the bed had to learn to remain perfectly still, curling their body inward to avoid contacting the freezing brickwork just inches away. To touch the wall in the middle of the night was to receive a sharp, icy shock that would instantly banish sleep. Instead, they would drift off to the sound of the wind rattling the loose glass panes, their heads tucked beneath the heavy covers, breathing in the enclosed warm air they had created together, entirely dependent on one another to keep the winter frost at bay. If these quiet reflections on the lives of those who came before us bring a sense of calm to your evening, please take a small moment to support the channel. You can subscribe to Sleepy History with Kevin, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your gentle support helps ensure that these ordinary stories of human resilience continue to be told in the quiet hours of the night. The world outside the front door of the back-to-back house offered no relief from the dampness within. Instead, it seemed to actively reinforce it. The narrow cobblestone streets and dark, enclosed courtyards were designed with the same disregard for human well-being as the houses themselves. Between the long rows of terraces ran tight passages where the sun rarely penetrated, even on the brightest summer days in the autumn and winter. These alleys became wind tunnels, channeling the freezing drafts directly toward the thin wooden doors of the working-class dwellings. Hovering over everything was the unmistakable heavy signature of the Industrial Revolution: coal smoke. Thousands of tall, slender brick chimneys from nearby textile mills, iron foundries, and locomotive works poured torrents of black, sulphurous smoke into the atmosphere day and night. When this thick pollution combined with the natural moisture-laden mist of the British climate, it created a dense, yellowish-grey fog that contemporary writers called a London particular or a pea super. This smog was so thick that it could completely blot out the sun by noon, turning midday into an eerie, perpetual twilight. For the families living in the industrial courts, this outdoor air was impossible to keep at bay. It drifted through the microscopic gaps around the window sashes and accumulated under the doors. The interior of the home became filled with a faint, persistent scent of burnt coal and sulphur. Every surface, from the simple wooden table to the white lime-washed walls, would gradually collect a fine, greasy layer of black soot. If a child wiped their hand across the mantelpiece or the windowsill, their fingertips would come away stained with the dark residue of the town's industry. This soot created a heartbreaking challenge for the mothers trying to maintain a semblance of cleanliness. Doing the laundry was an immense, exhausting task that took an entire day of manual labour. Water had to be carried by hand from the outdoor pump, heated in a heavy iron copper over the fireplace, and the clothes scrubbed using harsh lye soap. But once the garments were washed, drying them became a cruel puzzle. If they were hung outside in the small courtyard, they would quickly catch the falling soot from the chimneys, turning grey and dirty before they could even dry. Consequently, lines of wet clothing were routinely strung across the ceiling of the tiny living room inside. The evaporation from these heavy wet cotton shirts and wool stockings added yet another layer of thick moisture to the air. The family would sit beneath a canopy of damp laundry, listening to the water slowly drip onto the stone floor, while the cold fog pressed heavily against the window panes outside, sealing them all in a world where dryness was nothing more than a distant luxury. Living in an environment that was perpetually cold and damp left a permanent mark on the physical well-being of the children who grew up within these brick walls. The human body is incredibly resilient, but the combination of stagnant air, constant moisture, and a lack of direct sunlight created a unique set of health challenges for the working-class families of industrial Britain. In the medical journals of the 19th century, physicians began to notice specific patterns of illness that seemed entirely tied to the design of the industrial towns. One of the most widespread ailments among young children was rickets, a condition that softened and weakened the bones. At the time, people did not fully understand the science of vitamins, but they did notice a clear pattern. Children raised in the deep shadow-filled courts of back-to-back terraces, where the sun never touched the ground, were far more likely to develop bowed legs and frail statuettes. It became so common in the northern industrial towns that continental European doctors actually began calling rickets the English disease. Alongside the structural changes to their bones, almost every child in the neighbourhood carried a persistent, rhythmic winter cough. The dampness that saturated the wallpaper and condensed on the walls was the perfect breeding ground for mold spores and respiratory irritants. From November until the arrival of the pale spring sun in April, the sound of coughing was an ambient backdrop to family life, echoing softly through the thin partition walls that separated one house from the next. Yet, in the absence of expensive modern medicine or accessible doctors, mothers relied on an arsenal of traditional remedies and sheer, fierce devotion to keep their little ones comfortable. When a child came home from the mill with chills, her mother would wrap her feet in flannel cloths that had been warmed by the dying embers of the hearth. she might mix a simple soothing syrup made from wild honey, vinegar, or a bit of boiled linseed to coat a raspy throat before bed. There was a profound tenderness in these small acts of domestic medicine. In the middle of the night, when the room was freezing and the damp walls seemed to close in, a mother would sit awake by the shared bed, gently rubbing a mixture of camphor and lard onto her child's chest to ease their breathing. These small gestures could not change the structural flaws of the house, nor could they banish the soot from the sky outside, but they provided an emotional warmth, a protective barrier of human love that shielded the children from the coldest realities of the world they inhabited. Despite the persistent cold and the dampness that seemed to define the physical boundaries of their world, the human spirit inside these industrial homes refused to be entirely dampened. Children possess a remarkable universal ability to discover play and magic in the most unpromising of places, and the youth of 19th-century Britain were no exception. When the dark winter evenings closed in and the weather outside made the cobblestone streets unusable, the small space around the hearth became a theatre of imagination. With the single candle or oil lamp carefully placed on the wooden table, the flickering light would cast long, dramatic shadows against the damp, lime-washed brick walls. Children would gather close, using their hands and fingers to construct intricate shadow puppets, birds taking flight, barking dogs, and running rabbits that danced across the uneven plaster. The wet patches on the wall, which during the day were a reminder of the house's flaws, transformed at night into mysterious islands or uncharted continents in a geography of their own making. Storytelling was another precious commodity that cost nothing but brought immense warmth to the frozen rooms. Grandparents who had migrated from the rural villages decades before would pass down old folklore, ghost stories, and traditional ballads from the countryside. They spoke of green fields, ancient forests, and mythical creatures that lived far away from the turning wheels of the cotton mills. These narratives transported the young listeners out of the heavy soot-laden air of the city, allowing their minds to wander through bright, sunlit landscapes before they drifted off to sleep. The sense of community among the neighbours in the back-to-back courts acted as a vital social safety net that kept despair at bay, because the houses were built so closely together, sharing a common rear wall and facing a tight central courtyard. Privacy was a rarity, but solidarity was abundant. If a family ran out of coal on a particularly freezing Tuesday, a neighbour from 3 doors down would arrive with a small iron scuttle containing a few precious lumps to keep the fire going. When a mother was taken ill, the women of the court would take turns watching her children, washing her laundry, or sharing a warm pot of broth. This mutual reliance turned the cold, damp terraces into something resembling an extended family. They shared their hardships, celebrated their small victories, and faced the long, bitter winters with a collective resilience. The architecture may have been designed by landlords to maximize density and profit, but the people who inhabited those spaces infused them with a deep, enduring humanity that no amount of industrial damp could ever fully wash away. If you're finding comfort in these gentle historical journeys and want to ensure you never miss our quiet stories of the past, please take a brief moment to subscribe to the channel. Hitting the like button and leaving a thoughtful comment below helps Sleepy History with Kevin grow and reach more tired minds seeking a peaceful sanctuary tonight. When the long, grueling winter finally began to yield to the first pale hints of spring, the relationship between the industrial family and their home underwent a subtle transformation. In the modern world, the arrival of spring brings an immediate sense of relief as automated heating systems are turned down and windows are thrown open to let in the fresh, warm breeze. But in the back-to-back terraces of the 19th century, the transition between seasons was a much slower, more complicated negotiation with the physical structure of the building. The thick, porous brick walls that had absorbed the winter rain and groundwater for months did not dry out simply because the calendar had changed. In fact, a peculiar phenomenon often occurred in the early spring. As the outside air began to warm up slightly, the interior of the house could feel even colder and more clammy than before. The massive block of damp masonry acted as a giant thermal reservoir, holding onto the deep winter frost and radiating a stubborn, icy chill into the small rooms. It was during these transitional weeks that the lack of cross-ventilation became most apparent. The heavy, stagnant air inside the home, laden with the accumulated odours of winter coal smoke and damp clothing, was difficult to displace. A mother could open the small front window, but without a rear opening to create a draught, the fresh air would merely hover near the glass, unable to push the heavy, moist atmosphere out of the dark corners at the back of the room. Yet, despite this structural stubbornness, the arrival of warmer days brought an undeniable sense of liberation to the children. The true living room of the industrial working class was not the damp space inside the house, it was the cobblestone street and the shared courtyard outside. As soon as the morning sun managed to climb high enough into the sky to pour a narrow ribbon of golden light down into the tight alleyways, the children would spill out of their doorways like birds escaping a cage. On these cobblestones, away from the sweating walls, they would play traditional street games that required no expensive toys. They would use a piece of broken white chalk to draw hopscotch grids on the stones, or skip ropes made from scraps of old hemp utility lines discarded by the nearby warehouses. Small toddlers would sit on the smooth doorsteps, their bare feet soaking in the rare warmth of the sun, while their mothers stood by the communal water pump, chatting, laughing, and enjoying a brief respite from their domestic battles against the damp. These sunlit afternoons were precious oases of brightness in childhoods that were otherwise framed by grey industrial routine. The warmth of the spring sun on a child's face was a physical blessing, a temporary erasure of the cold draughts that awaited them at bedtime, reminding them that the world outside was still capable of gentleness and renewal, even in the heart of industrial Britain. In the heart of a home that was constantly cold and damp, the evening meal stood as a crucial milestone of the day. It was much more than a simple act of refuelling the physical body after hours of exhausting labour in the textile mills or workshops. It was a ritual of gathering, a moment where the family could finally close the door against the dark, foggy streets and create a temporary sanctuary of safety, light, and shared comfort around the kitchen table. The centrepiece of this evening ritual was almost always a heavy cast-iron pot known as a cauldron or a stew pot, which sat directly over the small coal fire, because money was scarce and ingredients had to stretch across many hungry mouths. The meals were masterpieces of domestic economy. A mother would visit the local market late on Saturday nights when the butchers and vegetable sellers dropped their prices to clear their remaining stock. She would return with a few wrinkled potatoes, a couple of bruised onions, and some cheap marrow-filled bones or scraps of coarse mutton. These modest ingredients were placed into the iron pot with plenty of water and left to simmer slowly for hours. As the afternoon turned to evening, a rich, savoury aroma would begin to rise from the hearth, filling the small room. This scent possessed a magical quality. It travelled into the dark, damp corners of the house, cutting through the smell of stale coal smoke and wet brickwork. For the children walking home through the freezing twilight, the mere anticipation of that warm, steaming soup was enough to put a light spring back into their tired steps. When the family finally gathered around the worn wooden table, the mother would ladle the thick stew into simple earthenware bowls. There were no individual luxuries, and everyone ate with mismatched spoons, dipping thick crusts of stale bread into the warm broth until the bowls were wiped entirely clean. The heat from the steaming soup would rise into their faces, warming their frozen cheeks and sending a wave of comfort through their entire bodies. For an hour or two, the structural flaws of the back-to-back terrace were entirely forgotten. The damp patches on the walls were hidden by the shadows, and the cold draughts blowing under the door were ignored. In these quiet moments, as the family talked in low, tired voices about the events of the day, they discovered that the true strength of a home did not lie in its bricks and mortar, but in the unseen bonds of love and shared endurance that held them all together through the darkest winters. If you're enjoying this peaceful journey into the ordinary lives of the past and want to support our historical storytelling, please consider taking a brief moment to subscribe to the channel. Liking the video and dropping a gentle comment below helps Sleepy History with Kevin continue to create a soothing, restful space for listeners all around the world. Our understanding of what it felt like to grow up inside these cold, damp, back-to-back terraces does not come from imagination alone. It is preserved for us in the fragile pages of history, in the detailed parliamentary reports of the 19th century, the meticulous surveys conducted by early social reformers, and the deeply personal entries found in the diaries of ordinary working people. When we read these documents today, we are granted a rare, unvarnished window into a world that polite Victorian society often preferred to ignore. During the 1830s and 1840s, social investigators like Edwin Chadwick and James Phillips Kay walked through the narrow, unpaved courts of cities like Manchester and Leeds. They carried notebooks, counting the number of people crammed into single rooms, measuring the depth of water in the flooded cellars, and recording the dampness that compromised the structural integrity of the walls. These investigators were shocked by what they discovered. They realized that the physical condition of the working-class home was directly linked to the health, lifespan, and morale of the entire nation. Even more poignant than the official statistics are the testimonies of the children themselves. When the Sadler Committee investigated factory conditions, they asked young workers about their home lives. Children described being lifted out of their beds by their parents while still half asleep in the dark morning hours, their limbs stiff from the overnight chill of the bedroom. They spoke of returning home late at night, too exhausted to eat, simply crawling back into shared beds under heavy piles of old coats to find whatever warmth they could before the factory bell rang again. Remembering these historical accounts is not about dwelling on past hardships, it is an act of deep respect and recognition. The children who grew up in those damp, smoky rooms were not just passive victims of an industrial system, they survived. They found ways to laugh, to play, to support their neighbours, and to love their families. As they grew older, many of them became the very voices that organised the first trade unions, cooperative societies, and mutual aid networks that eventually forced the government to pass housing reforms and public health laws. The ambient warmth we enjoy today in our modern homes, the dry walls, the clean air, the privacy of our own beds, was built slowly and imperfectly upon the resilience of those who came before us. Their endurance laid the groundwork for a safer, gentler world. By listening to their stories in the quiet hours of the night, we honour their memory, keeping their experiences alive in our collective consciousness and finding a deep, quiet gratitude for the comforts that protect us from the elements outside. This content is inspired by and adapted from public domain works available through Project Gutenberg. The material has been transformed through original narration, editing and storytelling to create a unique experience for educational and entertainment purposes. Inside these cramped industrial dwellings, every single object owned by the family had to perform a double duty, fighting a quiet, relentless battle against the prevailing atmospheric moisture. Space was a luxury, and furniture was treated not as decoration, but as a practical line of defence against the cold. Among the few possessions a working-class family might own, the bedding and the simple wooden storage chests were perhaps the most critical to their daily survival. The mattresses used by millions of working-class children were not made of foam or spring steel. They were simple sacks woven from coarse canvas, stuffed tightly with straw, wood shavings or flock, which was the low-grade waste cotton wool left over from the textile milling processes. While a fresh straw mattress was relatively comfortable and warm, it possessed one major flaw in a damp environment: it was highly absorbent. Over weeks of exposure to the humid air of a back-to-back bedroom, the straw inside would slowly draw in the dampness, becoming heavy, compressed, and prone to a distinct earthy mustiness. To prevent the bedding from rotting from the inside out, mothers had to practice a clever, exhausting routine of domestic maintenance. Whenever a dry, windy day occurred, or when the kitchen fire was built up slightly higher to boil water for the weekly wash, the mattress would be dragged down the narrow winding stairs. It would be propped up on two simple wooden chairs right in front of the hearth, allowing the radiant heat of the coal fire to bake the core of the mattress, driving the trapped moisture out in slow, invisible currents of steam. When straw was scarce or too damp to use, families looked for alternative insulation materials to protect their children from the freezing cold that migrated upward from the unpaved earth or damp cellar stone flags. The most common solution was old, discarded newspapers. Paper, when layered thickly beneath a thin canvas mattress, acted as an incredibly effective thermal barrier. The trapped pockets of air between the sheets of newsprint prevented the rising chill from reaching the sleeping children above. A child settling down for the night could often hear the dry, rhythmic crinkling of old printing ink and cheap paper beneath them every time they shifted their weight in the dark. It was a humble sound, but an incredibly comforting one. It was a physical reminder that through small, ingenious adaptations, using the discarded waste of the industrial print shops to keep the winter frost at bay, their parents had woven a fragile safety net of warmth around them, ensuring that even in a house that was always cold, the human instinct for comfort and protection would find a way to prevail. As the deep hours of the night took hold, the grand, roaring machinery of the industrial town would finally slow its frantic pace. The endless clatter of the textile looms and the heavy, rhythmic thud of the iron foundries retreated into a distant, muted hum that vibrated softly through the cold night air. Inside the back-to-back terrace, the world contracted until it was no larger than the perimeter of the shared bed. The atmosphere grew profoundly quiet, punctuated only by the subtle, organic sounds of the house settling under the pressure of the winter frost. In the complete stillness of the bedroom, a child could listen to the unique vocabulary of a cold house. There was the faint, sharp crack of the wooden rafters contracting as the temperature plummeted toward freezing, and the soft, dry rustle of the straw mattress responding to the slightest movement. Outside the single-pane window, the damp fog would begin to freeze, painting intricate, feather-like patterns of white frost across the cold glass. These ice crystals acted as a temporary, beautiful curtain, blocking out the sight of the dark, soot-stained alleyways and turning the small room into an isolated pod of absolute quiet. To combat the intense chill that settled over the blankets in these late hours, working-class families utilized one of the simplest and most enduring warmth remedies of the era, the hearth brick. Before the small coal fire was fully extinguished for the evening, a couple of heavy, ordinary building bricks would be placed carefully on the top plate of the iron grate, right next to the dying embers. Over hours, these dense clay bricks would slowly absorb the residual heat, trapping it deep within their porous cores. Just before turning in, the mother would carefully lift the hot bricks using an old pair of iron tongs. She would wrap them tightly in multiple layers of worn-out flannel or thick wool rags to ensure the hot clay would not scorch the skin or the bedding. These wrapped bricks were then slid deep beneath the heavy blankets, right down to the foot of the bed where the children's feet were tucked. The sensation of touching those hot flannel-covered bricks after a long day of walking on freezing cobblestones was an unmatched luxury. The children would press their cold heels against the radiant warmth, feeling the heat slowly migrate up their legs, relaxing their stiff muscles and dissolving the tension of the long workday. It was a humble piece of engineering, just a fragment of the town's raw material transformed into a vessel of comfort, but it held its heat faithfully until the pale morning light, keeping the darkness and the creeping damp at bay while the household slept in peaceful defiance of the winter night. In the quietest interval of the night, during those hours that exist right before the first shift of the morning mills begins to stir, the industrial home achieved a state of deep, undisturbed equilibrium. The cold and the dampness remained outside, pressed firmly against the exterior brickwork, unable to penetrate the thick barrier of blankets and the concentrated body heat of the sleeping family. Within this small, enclosed space, the harshness of the 19th-century economic machine was temporarily suspended, replaced by the soft, rhythmic sound of steady breathing. It is in these silent moments that we can truly appreciate the quiet triumphs of the working-class household, These homes were built with minimal care, designed by distant landlords to compress as many human lives into as small a space as physically possible. Yet the people who lived inside them refused to let their domestic lives be defined by mere survival. Through the daily execution of small repetitive routines, tending the fire, drying the laundry, sharing the food and warming the bricks for the bed, they transformed these cold, damp boxes of masonry into genuine sanctuaries of human affection. The children sleeping top to tail beneath the heavy pile of coats were learning something profound about the world, something that no schoolbook could ever fully teach them. They were learning the absolute value of mutual reliance. They knew that if one sibling pulled the blanket too far to the left, the other would feel the freezing air of the room. They understood that their comfort was entirely dependent on their cooperation. This shared endurance forged a specific texture of family life that was incredibly strong, a collective resilience that would stay with them as they grew into adults and began to demand better conditions for themselves and their own children. Outside, the frozen fog began to thin slightly, drifting between the narrow chimneys and over the quiet, empty courtyards. The heavy iron street lamps, lit by gas and casting a soft flickering amber glow onto the frost-covered cobblestones, stood like lonely sentinels in the dark. The world was waiting, suspended in a peaceful lull before the grand machinery of progress woke up once more. But for now, inside the warm centre of the bed, the day's labour was a distant memory, and the night's rest was complete. The house held its breath, protecting its occupants, keeping the weather out, and preserving the quiet, sacred warmth of the human spirit through the very coldest hours of the dawn. There was a unique, unmistakable texture to the human relationships formed within the dense grid of the back-to-back terraces. Because these houses shared their rear and side walls with identical dwellings, the concept of absolute physical privacy, as we understand it today, simply did not exist. The partition walls between the homes were often only a single brick thick, coated in a thin layer of coarse plaster. This meant that the sounds of everyday life carried easily from one household to another, weaving the small community into a single, shared human tapestry. Lying awake in the dark, a child could often hear the muffled signs of life from the family next door. They could hear the low, rhythmic murmur of a neighbour soothing a crying infant, the heavy footsteps of a tired father returning late from a distant railway yard, or the soft crackling sound of a coal fire being stoked on the other side of the brickwork. Rather than being a source of annoyance, these ambient sounds provided a strange, comforting reassurance. They were a constant, invisible reminder that no one was truly alone in their struggle against the cold and the dampness of the industrial winter. This auditory closeness fostered a deep, instinctual empathy among the residents of the court. Because you could hear your neighbours' difficulties, you naturally understood their situation without the need for formal explanations. If a sudden deep cough echoed through the wall for several nights in a row, a woman from across the alley would automatically arrive the next morning with a cup of hot herbal tea or a clean piece of flannel, offering assistance before she was even asked. It was a community bound together, not by wealth or luxury, but by the shared geography of their shared hardships. The small courtyards and narrow passages between the terraces became communal spaces where this solidarity was practiced daily. In these shared areas, away from the damp interiors of their individual rooms, the women would look out for each other's children, ensuring that the little ones playing on the cobblestones were kept safe from the heavy cart traffic of the main roads. They shared the collective knowledge of survival, the best way to seal a drafty window frame with scraps of old wool, the cheapest stall for buying winter potatoes, and the most effective ways to dry bedding when the dampness seemed to conquer the house. As the final hours of the night slowly dissolved into the early morning mist, this dense network of human connection remained perfectly intact, wrapped around the cold brick buildings like an invisible protective blanket. The architecture of industrial Britain had been designed to compress human bodies into tight, profitable spaces, but the people who lived inside transformed that compression into a profound closeness. They turned shared walls into shared strength, proving that even in a world dominated by iron, steam, and freezing dampness, the simple warmth of human companionship could never be completely driven out. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the deep black of the night began to soften into a heavy, charcoal grey. The frozen fog that had hung suspended over the industrial court for hours started to lift, drifting lazily over the sharp angles of the slate roofs and the tall, dark silhouettes of the factory chimneys. The absolute silence of the late hours was broken by the first true sound of the approaching day, the sharp, rhythmic click-clack of heavy wooden clogs striking the frozen cobblestones outside. These were the sounds of the early morning workers, the iron founders, the engineers, and the textile hands who filled the first shifts of the day. Wrapped in thick woolen shawls and heavy coats, their heads bowed against the biting dawn wind, they walked in small silent groups through the narrow alleys. Inside the back-to-back house, the children would stir slightly beneath their heavy layers of blankets, comforted by the familiar, predictable rhythm of those footsteps on the stones below. It was a sign that the world was waking up, that the darkness was recrudescencing, and that another day of shared endurance had officially begun. Then, piercing through the cold, misty air of the town, came the long, mournful wail of the factory steam whistles, one after another from different mills across the district. These industrial sirens shattered the remaining stillness, calling thousands of families out of their shared beds and back to the roaring grid of production. The mother would already be on her feet, her hands moving deftly in the dim light to revive the tiny embers of the hearth fire, ensuring that a small pocket of warmth would be waiting to welcome her children when they finally returned from their long hours of labour. Take a deep breath. Now let the sound of those distant boots on the cobblestones and the echo of the factory whistles fade away into the shadows of the past. Those long, freezing winters of 19th-century Britain have passed into the pages of history books, leaving behind only the cold brick walls and the extraordinary stories of the people who lived within them. The dampness has dried, the coal smoke has cleared from the sky, and the long struggle for basic warmth has been won. As you lie here in the safety of your own room, feel the heavy protective texture of the blankets surrounding you right now. Listen to the quiet, gentle silence of a home that is successfully keeping the weather out, holding on to its heat, and providing you with a sanctuary of absolute comfort. The world outside your window is peaceful, the air inside is clean and dry, and there is nothing more required of you tonight. You are warm, you are entirely safe, and the long quiet hours of rest are waiting to carry you away. Every now and then, the unpredictable British climate would grant these northern industrial towns a rare, magnificent gift, a succession of bright, completely cloudless summer days. When this happened, the heavy blanket of yellowish smog that usually clung to the chimneys would lift, swept away by a gentle breeze from the distant hills. For a few glorious weeks the sun reigned supreme, pouring its unfiltered golden warmth down into the narrowest courts and the deepest alleys of the back-to-back terraces. During these precious summer spells, the houses underwent a massive community-wide drying process. Every window that could be pried open was left wide to invite the warm, dry air inside. The porous brick walls, which had stored the deep dampness of autumn and the bitter frost of winter for months, finally began to release their moisture. The dark, clammy patches on the plaster slowly faded, replaced by the pale, dry look of clean brickwork. The heavy scent of stagnant moisture dissolved, replaced by the simple, clean smell of open air and warm stone. The entire rhythm of life shifted outdoors. The elderly, whose joints had ached through the long, freezing winters, brought their simple wooden chairs out onto the smooth doorsteps. They sat with their eyes closed, tilting their faces toward the sky, letting the ambient solar heat soak deep into their bones. Mothers dragged their heavy mattresses out into the middle of the courtyard, propping them against the brickwork to let the sun bake away the last remnants of winter dampness from the straw inside. For the children, these summer afternoons were a magical interlude of pure freedom. The cobblestones, which were so often icy and dangerous, were now warm beneath their bare feet. They played without the heavy burden of woolen shawls and oversized winter coats. their laughter echoing off the dry walls of the court. There was no need to huddle close to a tiny iron grate for warmth. The entire world had become a source of comfort. As the sun began its long, slow descent toward the western horizon, casting beautiful, elongated shadows across the warm brickwork, a profound sense of peace settled over the neighborhood. The working families sat outside together in the cooling twilight, talking in low, contented voices, enjoying the simple luxury of a dry home and a warm evening. It was a powerful reminder that no matter how long or severe the winter might be, the light and warmth would always find a way to return, bringing comfort and renewal to those who had held on so resiliently through the dark. As the beautiful summer twilight slowly faded into a warm, star-filled night, the back-to-back terrace retained the comforting heat it had gathered throughout the long, sunlit day. The dense brick walls, which had acted as a reservoir of cold for so many months, were now functioning in reverse. Having baked under the direct rays of the sun, the masonry radiated a gentle, soothing warmth inward, completely banishing the stubborn chill that usually lingered in the corners of the lower rooms. Inside the small upstairs bedroom, the atmosphere was entirely transformed. The window was left cracked open, just an inch, allowing a soft evening breeze to slide into the room, bringing with it the faint, pleasant scent of summer grass from the distant fields beyond the town. There were no damp patches sweating on the plaster tonight, and no icy draughts creeping under the doorframe to disturb the sleeping household. The air was light, dry, and perfectly still. The children lay on their shared mattress without the heavy, oppressive weight of winter coats and coarse burlap sacks piled over them, covered only by a single thin linen sheet. Their bodies were relaxed, their muscles entirely loose after an afternoon of unburdened play on the warm cobblestones. The shared body heat that had been a strict necessity for survival during the freezing winter months was now just a comfortable, familiar presence, a gentle grounding element in the quiet dark. Through the open window, the night sounds of the industrial town were soft and slow. The occasional heavy stamp of a cart horse on the distant main road, or the faint, musical chime of a church clock striking the midnight hour, drifted over the rooftops, adding to the profound sense of safety and calm that enveloped the neighborhood. The grand engines of the mills were quiet, and the sky, for once free of dense coal smoke, allowed the soft light of the moon to trace silver lines across the clean glass pane. In this rare, perfect comfort, the children drifted into a deep, restorative sleep. The hardships of the past winter and the uncertainties of the coming autumn dissolved into the peaceful dark, leaving only the immediate, precious reality of a warm bed and a dry room. It was a moment of absolute rest, a quiet sanctuary carved out of the heart of industrial Britain, where the human spirit could simply pause, breathe, and gather its strength in the protective embrace of a peaceful summer night. As the golden weeks of summer slowly drew to a close, the air in the industrial town began to carry a new, familiar crispness. The long, warm evenings shortened, and the sun began its descent earlier each day, casting deep amber light across the high brick facades of the textile mills. The arrival of autumn was not a sudden shock, but a gradual, rhythmic shift that the families of the back-to-back terraces understood perfectly. It was time to prepare, to fortify their modest dwellings, and to get ready for the colder months that lay ahead. This period of transition was marked by a quiet, purposeful energy throughout the courtyard. Mothers and fathers turned their attention to the structural weak points of their homes, executing small, clever repairs with whatever materials they had on hand. Old wool stockings that were completely worn through at the heels were not thrown away. Instead, they were stuffed tightly into the narrow gaps between the wooden window frames and the brickwork, creating handmade draft excluders to keep the autumn winds at bay. The small iron fireplace, which had been resting during the heat of summer, was given a thorough cleaning. The accumulated soot from the previous winter was carefully brushed out, and the iron grate was polished until it shone in the dim light. Securing coal became the primary focus of the family's weekly budget once again. Every spare penny was allocated to the coal merchant, and the children would walk along the railway embankments after school, their eyes sharp for any small lumps of black fuel that might have fallen from the steam locomotives passing by. There was no sense of dread in these preparations. Rather, it was a display of profound intergenerational competence. These families knew exactly what the winter would demand of them, and they faced the challenge with a calm, organized resilience. They had survived the damp and the cold before, and they possessed the collective knowledge required to do it again. Every scrap of flannel preserved, every crack in the doorframe sealed, and every extra piece of coal stored in the cellar was a small victory of foresight over the elements. When the first true autumn rain began to fall, drumming a steady, rhythmic beat against the glass window panes, the family was ready. The small fire was lit, casting its familiar flickering orange glow across the dry room. As the air outside grew colder, the interior of the house remained secure, a testament to the family's hard work and unyielding spirit. They sat together in the warmth they had carefully constructed, knowing that whatever the changing seasons might bring, their home would stand strong, held together by love, routine, and an unbreakable bond of mutual protection. With the autumn season firmly established, the daily life of the industrial household moved completely back indoors, gathering around the revitalized sanctuary of the hearth. The transition was now complete, and the rhythm of the home adjusted to the shorter days and the cooler, moisture-laden air that rolled in from the surrounding countryside. Outside, the cobblestones of the court were polished to a dark shine by the frequent evening drizzles, reflecting the pale, warm gaslights that flickered at the entrance of the alley. Inside the back-to-back terrace, the atmosphere was thick with a sense of quiet comfort. The small fire in the grate burned steadily, casting long, lazy shadows across the ceiling. On the wooden table sat a fresh pot of hot tea, its steam rising in slow, elegant curls and dissipating into the warm air of the room. The children, having returned from their duties, sat quietly on the floorboards near the hearth, the residual heat from the iron oven warming their backs and inducing a pleasant, heavy drowsiness. The heavy rain outside, rather than being an enemy, became a soothing background track to their evening. It pattered softly against the single glass pane, a rhythmic, repetitive sound that emphasized the security of the dry space they had maintained. Every draught had been successfully blocked, and the thick brick walls, though cold on the outside, held the indoor heat effectively, creating a stable pocket of absolute tranquility in the middle of the bustling industrial town. As the evening progressed toward the hours of rest, the conversations grew fewer and quieter, dissolving into comfortable silences. The mother quietly folded the clean laundry by the light of the fire, her movements slow and deliberate, while the father checked the latch on the front door one final time. There was a profound, unspoken satisfaction in this moment, the knowledge that despite the changing weather and the return of the damp season, their small home remained a safe, warm vessel for the souls inside. The children crawled into their shared bed, pulling the heavy familiar blankets up to their chins. Their feet found the warm spots under the covers, and their eyes grew heavy as they watched the dying embers of the fire paint faint, orange patterns on the far wall. The world outside was cold and wet, but inside this small room, wrapped in the protective care of their family, there was only warmth, safety, and the deep, undisturbed peace of a well-deserved rest. As the clock crept past midnight, the autumn night deepened into a state of absolute velvet stillness. The steady patter of the rain outside gradually gave way to a soft, lingering mist that wrapped itself around the brick chimneys, softening the harsh edges of the industrial landscape. Inside the small room of the back-to-back terrace, the active energy of the evening surrendered entirely to the gentle, restorative power of sleep. The home became a quiet container of dreams, perfectly insulated from the demands of the waking world. The fire in the hearth had now burned down to its final, most beautiful stage, a bed of thick, glowing embers that pulsed with a deep, radiant orange light. These coals did not roar or crackle. Instead, they breathed out a silent, consistent wave of dry warmth that hovered over the floorboards and kept the room perfectly comfortable. In the darkness, The shifting glow cast soft ambient reflections on the walls, creating a hypnotic visual rhythm that mimicked the slow, steady breathing of the sleeping children. Every element of the room seemed to conspire to promote rest. The thick wool blankets, heavy with the history of the family's survival, pressed down on the children with a comforting, protective weight, acting like a gentle anchor against the night. The dampness that had once threatened the corners of the house was completely held at bay, defeated by the day's preparation and the residual heat of the brickwork. It was a complete and total victory of the domestic spirit over the cold realities of the changing seasons. Through the quiet air, the distant, muffled chime of a town hall clock struck the hour, its deep tones vibrating softly through the fog before melting away into nothingness. The sound did not disturb the household, rather it served as a gentle reassurance that the time for labour had passed, and that these hours belonged exclusively to rest, recovery, and peace. The world outside was resting its iron muscles, and inside, the human heart of the house was doing the same. Let your own thoughts slow down now, mirroring the slow fading of those beautiful warm embers in the hearth. Feel the absolute security of your own bed, the dryness of the air around you, and the peaceful stillness that fills your space. Like the children of the past who found their sanctuary in the middle of a bustling world, you have found yours tonight. There are no more tasks to complete, no more worries to carry, and no more cold to fight. You are protected, you are warm, and you are completely free to drift down into a deep, beautiful, and undisturbed sleep. Before the first pale light of dawn could even attempt to break through the eastern sky, a thick, impenetrable winter fog rolled in from the nearby river valleys, swallowing the industrial town whole. This was the famous heavy mist of the 19th century, dense with the silent humidity of the season and tinted grey by the cold air. It drifted slowly through the narrow courts, wrapping around the gas lamps until their flames looked like faint, hovering amber spheres in a sea of charcoal cloud. Outside, the world became completely visual-less, a silent void where all distances were erased and all corners were hidden. Yet inside the single brick wall of the back-to-back terrace, this heavy external gloom only served to intensify the feeling of absolute containment and safety. The small house had become an isolated island of life, a warm, dry fortress floating in a world of cold grey mist. The windowpane, now heavily misted over from the contrast between the indoor warmth and the outdoor freeze, acted as a physical barrier that kept the industrial winter completely at bay. The damp fog could press against the glass and crawl along the slate roof, but it could not touch the family resting within. The interior of the bedroom remained perfectly tuned to the frequency of deep sleep. The glowing remnants of the coal fire had faded into a soft layer of silver ash, but the heat it had generated during the evening remained trapped within the room's modest volume. The air was thick, warm, and entirely steady. Lying under the heavy layers of protective bedding, the children were completely cocooned, their bodies retaining a gentle, radiant warmth that made the thought of the external world feel like an impossible, distant rumour. In this profound isolation, the normal worries of life seemed to dissolve into the shadows. There were no thoughts of the long factory hours, no concerns about the dampness of the stones, and no anxieties about the future. The house was performing its most sacred duty. It was protecting its own, holding on to the human warmth that had been poured into it, and providing a quiet, unbroken sanctuary where the spirit could rest without fear. Allow yourself to sink deeper into this feeling of complete isolation from the busyness of the world. Just like the small house enclosed by the winter fog, your own room tonight is a perfect, unassailable fortress. The cold, the noise, and the demands of the outside world cannot cross your threshold. You are completely enclosed in a pocket of safety, wrapped in blankets that hold your warmth, and breathing air that is calm and still. The night is holding its breath for you. The darkness is protective, and you are entirely free to let go and surrender to the deep, silent current of sleep. As the morning hours advanced, the dense, suffocating blanket of winter fog began to undergo a subtle transformation. The sun, though still hidden behind a layer of pale northern clouds, sent enough ambient light into the atmosphere to turn the dark charcoal mist into a brilliant, luminous silver. With the slight shift in temperature, the moisture that had clung to the exterior of the back-to-back houses began to freeze solid, coating the iron downpipes, the wooden doors, and the stone windowsills in a delicate crystalline layer of hoarfrost. Looking out through the small window pane, the world appeared as if it had been lightly dusted with diamond powder. Every sharp corner of the industrial bricks was softened by the ice, and the cold cobblestones of the courtyard below gleamed like polished silver under the emerging light. It was a scene of stark, quiet beauty, a reminder that even in the middle of a crowded, soot-stained industrial town, nature could still create moments of absolute wonder and visual purity. Inside the home, this icy transformation outside was met with an enduring, stubborn pocket of domestic comfort. The family did not rush to meet the day. Instead, they lingered in the deep warmth of their bedding, watching the light change from grey to silver on the plaster walls. The thick, wrapped hearth bricks at the bottom of the bed were still warm to the touch, having faithfully preserved their thermal energy throughout the entire night, keeping the children's feet completely protected from the morning chill. Slowly, as the silver light grew stronger, a soft, rhythmic sound began to echo from the outside eaves. It was the gentle, musical dripping of the hoarfrost starting to melt where the pale sunlight touched the edge of the roof. Tick, push, tick. The tiny drops of water fell onto the stone flags below, creating a natural, repetitive metronome that seemed to slow down the passage of time itself, turning the early morning into an extended, peaceful interlude of rest. Let that slow, rhythmic dripping of the melting frost soothe your mind as you lie here in the complete comfort of your own space. The cold of the world outside is nothing more than a beautiful frame for the warmth you are currently experiencing. Every element of your environment is stable, secure, and dedicated to your relaxation. There is no urgency, no schedule to follow, and no cold to endure. You are completely safe, wrapped in a blanket of absolute peace, and ready to sink into the final, deepest layers of your night's rest. In the grand, unceasing cycle of time, the era of the damp back-to-back terraces and the thick coal smoke has slowly faded into a quiet, distant memory. The narrow courts that once echoed with the heavy steps of iron-shod clogs and the laughter of playing children have mostly been replaced by wide open avenues and modern sunlit buildings. Yet the deep human spirit that defined those spaces, the fierce resilience, the quiet dedication to family, and the instinctive community solidarity did not disappear when the old brick walls were finally dismantled. That spirit remains woven into the very fabric of our modern world. It is a silent foundation, a legacy of endurance that passed from parents to children through the simple act of sharing a cold room, warming a hearth brick, and keeping the winter frost at bay. When we look back at their lives from the comfort of the present day, we are not looking at a tragedy, but at a profound story of human victory. They proved night after night that the smallest ember of love and mutual care is more than powerful enough to conquer the darkest and most unforgiving environments. The lessons of their quiet endurance offer a beautiful grounding piece to our own minds tonight. Life, with all its complex demands, rapid changes and modern anxieties, often feels like a bustling, overwhelming current. But just like the families of the 19th century, who knew how to close their wooden doors against the heavy fog and create a small, perfect sanctuary of warmth around a single fire, you too have the power to step away from the noise of the world and find your own centre of absolute quiet. Let the weight of the past and the uncertainties of the future dissolve completely into the shadows of your room. The long journey through history has brought us back to this very moment, a moment dedicated entirely to your comfort, your safety, and your deep relaxation. The air you breathe is calm, the bed beneath you is supportive and secure, and the blankets around you hold a perfect, gentle warmth that completely seals out the elements. As the silver moonlight traces its familiar, peaceful path across your floor, Allow your mind to grow as still and quiet as the sleeping industrial town in the deepest hours of the night. There are no more stories to follow, no more thoughts to untangle, and no more efforts to make. The world outside is resting. The universe is holding you in perfect safety, and you are entirely free to close your eyes, let go of the waking world, and surrender completely to the deep, beautiful, and healing current of sleep. When the night reaches its absolute nadir, the point where the darkness is at its thickest and the morning is still nothing more than a distant promise, a profound, heavy stillness settles over the entire world. In this quiet space, the boundaries between the past and the present seem to soften, leaving behind only the universal, timeless experience of a human soul seeking rest. The ancient brick walls of the old terraces and the modern structures of today share the exact same night sky, watched over by the same eternal stars that have guided humanity through every generation. The atmosphere in your room has now achieved a state of perfect, undisturbed harmony. The air is completely still, holding a gentle ambient warmth that envelopes your body like a protective shield. There is no movement, no sudden sound, and no lingering tension to break the spell of this deep nocturnal quiet. Outside, the night wind moves through the trees with a soft, barely audible sigh, a gentle, natural lullaby that has remained unchanged for thousands of years, offering the same comfort to the modern dreamer as it did to the children of the industrial towns. This is the hour of complete surrender, the moment where the mind is finally allowed to lay down its heavy tools and stop its endless processing. The stories of endurance, the images of glowing hearths, and the quiet triumphs of the past have done their work. They have reminded us that warmth is not just a physical property of fire or insulation, but an act of care, a state of safety that we can carry within ourselves. With that realization, the need to worry about tomorrow simply dissolves into the darkness, leaving your mind light, unburdened, and peaceful. Every breath you take now is a step deeper into this sanctuary of rest. Feel the heavy supportive weight of your mattress, the soft texture of the pillows against your skin, and the reliable protection of the roof above you. You are entirely insulated from the demands of the world, tucked away in a quiet corner of existence where nothing is required of you but to exist, to breathe, and to heal. The universe is watching over your space, maintaining the darkness and holding the cold at bay. Let the final thoughts of the day fade away, like the very last wisps of wood smoke drifting into a clear winter sky. There is nothing left to analyze, nothing left to remember, and nothing left to hold on to. The dark is gentle, the silence is complete, and the warmth is absolute. Allow yourself to glide effortlessly into that smooth, dark river of unconsciousness, knowing that you are safe, you are warm, and you are entirely free to sleep. In this deep, unmoving core of the night, time itself seems to lose its rigid structure, stretching out into a vast, peaceful sea of absolute tranquility. The clock on the wall may continue its steady, quiet movement, but within the sanctuary of your room, the seconds slow down, aligning themselves with the calm, organic rhythm of your resting body. The world outside has grown completely translucent, its noises, its lights, and its endless demands fading into a distant, inconsequential murmur that can no longer reach your awareness. You are now floating in a perfect suspension of comfort. The air around you remains beautifully temperate, holding the gentle, clean warmth of a space that is entirely yours. Every muscle in your body has fully surrendered its weight to the mattress beneath, feeling the deep, supportive security that allows you to release the very last remnants of physical tension. Your shoulders are loose, your hands are completely relaxed, and your forehead is smooth, free from the lines of thought that occupy the waking hours. This absolute stillness is a rare, precious gift. In the daytime, the mind is a busy workshop, constantly building, sorting, and analyzing the fragments of life. But now, in the protective embrace of the dark, the workshop is closed. The tools have been put away, the workbench is clear, and the internal lights have been dimmed to a soft ambient glow. There is a profound beauty in this empty space, a quiet recognition that you have done enough, achieved enough, and endured enough for one day. Now your only duty is to simply be. Listen to the gentle, rhythmic sound of your own breathing, the soft rise and fall that connects you to the peaceful baseline of all living things. It is the same quiet breath that sustained the families of the past through their darkest winters, and it is the same faithful anchor that keeps you safe in the present. With each slow exhalation, imagine releasing any tiny hidden pockets of worry, letting them drift out into the shadows where they safely dissolve into nothingness. The darkness that surrounds you is not empty. It is a rich, warm velvet curtain designed to shield your senses and nurse your spirit back to full strength. It holds you with an incredible gentleness, promising that the world will take care of itself while you are away. You are tucked deep inside a cocoon of absolute safety, warm from the crown of your head to the tips of your toes. Let go of the shore now. Allow yourself to slip quietly into the deep, dark and beautiful water of sleep, drifting down without a single care into the wonderful oblivion of rest. At this precise coordinate of the night, the world achieves a state of absolute, breathless suspension. The gentle sighing of the wind outside has completely ceased, leaving the atmosphere so perfectly still that the line between the interior of your room and the infinite sky outside seems to dissolve. It is as if the entire planet has paused its rotation for a brief, sacred interval, creating an oasis of pure, undisturbed silence designed exclusively for your recovery and peace. In this beautiful vacuum of sound and movement, your mind begins to mirror the external stillness. The thoughts that were once active and vibrant have slowed down to a gentle, sluggish drift, turning into soft, abstract shapes that carry no weight and require no attention. Imagine your consciousness as a deep, perfectly calm pool of water in the middle of a quiet forest. There are no ripples on the surface, no currents disturbing the depths. It is completely clear, smooth and at rest, reflecting only the soft ambient dark that cradles it from all sides. The physical sensation of comfort has now become total and absolute. The blankets wrapped around you no longer feel like a separate material. They have become an extension of your own warmth, a soft, protective chrysalis that seals you away from every earthly care. The heavy density of the mattress supports you so perfectly that you feel almost weightless, floating effortlessly in a warm, dry cloud of tranquility. Every breath you take is smooth, deep, and effortless, drawing in the calm of the room and exhaling the last invisible fragments of the day. There is a profound freedom in this level of relaxation. You are completely detached from the grid of time, schedules, and identities. In this space, you do not have to be a worker, a thinker, a caregiver, or a planner. You are simply a living being, resting in the safety of a secure shelter, allowing the natural, instinctual mechanisms of sleep to rebuild your energy and soothe your spirit. The world outside can wait, the future can wait, and the morning is an ocean away. Feel the deep, magnetic pull of sleep growing stronger with every passing second. It is a gentle, heavy tide, rising up to carry you away from the shores of the waking world. Do not resist it. Do not try to hold on to the edge of awareness. Let yourself slip beneath the surface of this warm, dark, and beautiful sea. You are completely protected. You are boundlessly safe, and you are surrounded by an unyielding, eternal warmth. Close your eyes fully now. Let the darkness fold over you and drift away into the deep, sweet oblivion of a perfect night's rest. As the night continues its slow, majestic journey through the silent hours, your consciousness drifts into the beautiful, hazy borderland that lies right before the threshold of deep, restorative dreaming. In this soft, twilight state of the mind, the heavy structures of reality dissolve into light, ethereal mist. There are no boundaries here, no walls to define the space, and no rigid concepts of time to measure the passing moments. You are simply existing in a state of pure, unadulterated peace, balanced perfectly on the edge of a deep sleep. Imagine your spirit as a small, sturdy wooden boat that has finally returned from a long, arduous journey across a vast and stormy ocean. All day long you have navigated the choppy waters of life, steering through the winds of responsibility, task handling, and constant thinking. But now the voyage is officially over. The boat has entered a secluded, perfectly sheltered bay where the water is as smooth as glass, and the surface reflects the soft, silver light of 1,000 distant stars. The anchor has been dropped, sinking deep into the quiet, supportive earth below, holding you perfectly steady. The sails are lowered and neatly folded, their canvas soft and still in the midnight air. There are no more currents to fight, no more navigation routes to plan, and no more waves to brave. The boat just rocks, slowly and gently, in a rhythmic, comforting cadence that matches the slow, steady rise and fall of your chest as you breathe in the cool, clean air of your room. The warmth that surrounds you now is like a living presence, a thick, protective aura that keeps you entirely safe from the cold, unpredictable currents of the external world. Every element of your physical space is operating in perfect unison to ensure your absolute comfort. The sheets are soft against your skin, the pillows hold your head in a gentle, weightless embrace, and the heavy blankets provide a reassuring boundary that whispers to your subconscious that you're allowed to completely let go. Allow yourself to fully yield to this gentle rocking motion of the night. Let the final tiny fragments of your waking thoughts drift away like dry autumn leaves floating on the surface of the water, moving slowly out of sight until they vanish completely into the dark. You have arrived at your destination. You are exactly where you need to be. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to achieve, and nothing more to hold on to. The night is full of grace. The dark is your sanctuary, and you are entirely free to let the tide of sleep carry you down into the deepest, most beautiful depths of rest. Now, at this ultimate depth of the night, the last remaining threads of the waking world gently snap, releasing your mind into a state of pure, weightless freedom. The historical journey through the brick terraces, the cold winter fogs, and the glowing coal fires has fulfilled its purpose. Those images have become a soft, warm background melody, a comforting tapestry that has successfully guided your conscious mind away from its daily tracks and brought you to the very edge of total, beautiful oblivion. Your physical body has become incredibly heavy, sinking so deeply into the mattress that it feels as though you are melting into the structure of the bed itself. It is a wonderful restorative heaviness, the kind that comes when every single muscle, fibre and nerve has completely stopped working, trusting entirely in the safety of the space you have created. There is no longer any need to hold yourself up, to protect yourself, or to remain alert. The room is doing all the holding for you, guarding your breath and maintaining your sanctuary. In this state of profound relaxation, your room feels less like a physical structure of wood and plaster, and more like a soft, warm capsule floating safely in the quiet expanses of a peaceful universe. The modern world outside, with all its flashing lights, digital frequencies and endless schedules, has been completely turned off. It cannot penetrate this shield of stillness. Here, inside your cocoon of thick blankets, the only reality is the absolute purity of your own rest and the gentle, continuous warmth that keeps the cold at bay. Your breathing has slowed to its most natural, meditative pace, a soft, whispering tide that flows in and out without the slightest effort. Each breath draws in a wave of deep, cooling peace, and each exhalation releases the very last microparticles of tension that might have been hiding in the corners of your mind. Your thoughts are no longer sentences or worries. They are merely soft, fading colours, dissolving into the rich, velvety dark, like drops of ink in a vast, calm ocean. Let yourself sink even further now. Let the darkness fold its gentle arms around you, tucking you in against the rest of the universe. You are completely safe. You are boundlessly warm. You are entirely loved by the quiet peace of this room. There is nothing left to wait for, nothing left to think about, and no reason to stay awake. The deep, dark current of sleep is rising to meet you, and you are entirely ready to let go, to sink beneath the surface, and to rest in the beautiful, silent spaces of the night. With the arrival of this final, deepest phase of the night, the last remnants of conscious awareness begin to dissolve entirely, like mist evaporating under the touch of a soft dawn. The journey through time, through the narrow brick courts and the comforting warmth of ancient fires, has reached its natural, silent destination. The past and the present have finished their dialogue, melting into a singular, beautiful feeling of absolute security that wraps around your soul like a garment of pure light. Every corner of your mind has now become completely quiet. The endless internal monologue that guides you through the complexities of life has finally paused, its voice growing fainter and fainter until it is nothing more than a silent whisper, and then nothing at all. In this empty, beautiful space, there are no memories to analyze, no obligations to satisfy, and no anxieties to process. The slate is entirely clean, the room is perfectly still, and you are resting in the very center of a profound, unshakable tranquility. The physical world has faded into a distant, intangible abstraction. The mattress beneath you, the pillows cradling your head, and the heavy blankets draped over your body have merged into a single, cohesive cradle of warmth. You no longer feel the cold of the external winter or the demands of the modern world. You only feel the gentle, rhythmic pulse of your own heart and the deep, steady cadence of your breath. You have become an inhabitant of the night itself, perfectly aligned with the silent, healing rhythm of the turning earth. Let go of the final, tiny anchor of your awareness now. There is no longer any need to watch the dark, to listen to the silence, or to maintain a connection to the waking world. The fortress you have built tonight is solid and unassailable. It will stand guard over your body and your spirit without any effort from your part. The walls will hold the heat, the roof will keep out the weather, and the universe will manage the passage of time while you are away. Allow yourself to simply drift, weightless and free, into the expansive, welcoming darkness of a deep, dreamless sleep. Let the tide of rest wash over you completely, filling every space, soothing every nerve, and restoring your energy in the quiet laboratory of the night. You are safe. You are boundlessly warm. You are entirely at peace. Close your eyes for the final time tonight. Let the world slide away into the shadows and surrender your spirit to the beautiful, eternal embrace of rest. In this profound, ultimate stillness, the night reaches a state of beautiful, complete maturity. The entire universe seems to have contracted into this single warm room, making everything outside its walls disappear into a distant, dreamlike haze. There are no more long industrial winters, no more cold, damp stones, and no more modern anxieties to navigate. All paths have led to this exact point of absolute, unbroken rest, where the soul is granted total permission to withdraw from the world. Your consciousness is now like a feather floating downward through a sky of dark velvet, moving slower and softer with every passing breath. The physical boundaries of your body feel completely integrated with the deep comfort of your bed. The warmth inside your cocoon of blankets has stabilized into a perfect, natural temperature, mimicking the gentle protective heat of a hearth that never goes out. You are completely insulated, completely anchored, and completely untouchable by the cold. Every tiny cell within you is now resting, entering the quiet phase of deep recovery. The heart beats with a slow, calm, and reassuring rhythm, a steady metronome that whispers of safety and endurance. There is a magnificent freedom in this moment, the freedom of being completely unobserved, completely unburdened, and completely free from the concept of doing. You are no longer moving through time. You are letting time move gently around you while you remain perfectly still. Let the final invisible layer of tension in your mind melt away like snow touching warm water. There is no need to keep track of the story, no need to wait for the morning, and no need to hold on to even a single word. The dark is soft, the room is secure, and the silence is a loyal guardian standing watch at your door. You have done all that was required of you, and now the night is doing the rest, wrapping you in an embrace of absolute peace. Sink down further now, leaving the last shores of the waking world far behind. Allow yourself to dissolve into the gentle, heavy current of total oblivion, where dreams are soft and the rest is deep. You are safe, you are warm, and you are surrounded by an endless quiet comfort. Let go of the final thread, close your eyes to the deepest layer of the dark, and drift away into the beautiful healing sanctuary of a profound sleep. At this exquisite, suspended moment of the deep night, the entire world has grown completely translucent. The historical brick terraces, the narrow alleys, the distant chime of the town clocks, and the busy traffic of modern life have all dissolved into a singular, vast ocean of quietness. There are no more landmarks to guide the mind, no more memories to sift through, and no more narratives to follow. Everything has narrowed down beautifully to the immediate sacred present, to the simple, peaceful reality of this warm bed and this dark, quiet room. Your body has reached a state of perfect, heavy compliance with the law of rest. It feels as though you are no longer merely lying on the bed, but are instead being floating gently within a soft, weightless cloud of pure comfort. The temperature beneath the heavy blankets is a constant, nurturing presence, holding you in a gentle, warm embrace that never wavers. Every breath you take is a smooth, circular wave, inhaling the absolute stillness of the dark and exhaling the very last microscopic grains of alertness back into the shadows. In this deep sanctuary, your mind is finally free to completely empty its chambers. The thoughts that floated like faint colours a few moments ago have now faded into a beautiful dark blankness. There are no words left in the silence, no images left in the dark, and no echoes left in the space. The internal world has become as smooth and undisturbed as a frozen lake under a starless sky, holding nothing but the vast healing capacity of an unbroken, dreamless peace. You are completely and entirely safe. The walls of your shelter stand as strong and reliable sentinels against the outer cold, and the darkness outside is nothing more than a soft velvet blanket protecting your eyes from the coming day. There is no urgency in the universe tonight, no tasks waiting on the threshold, and no demands that can cross into this private kingdom of sleep. You have officially stepped out of the stream of time, leaving all its weights on the shore. Let yourself sink into the final, deepest layer of this velvet darkness. Do not look back at the waking world, and do not try to hold on to the remaining fragments of your thoughts. Allow yourself to be carried away entirely by the heavy, sweet, and magnetic tide of total oblivion. You are warm, you are protected, and you are surrounded by an endless, unyielding peace. Close your eyes to the very center of the dark. Let your breath carry you down and drift effortlessly into a profound, beautiful, and healing sleep. In this final, unmoving peak of the midnight hours, the world outside has faded so completely that it feels as though it has ceased to exist altogether. The historical echoes of the industrial town, the warmth of the coal fires, and the heavy winter fogs have all completed their work, leaving behind an inheritance of pure, undisturbed tranquility. There are no more distances to measure, no more timelines to cross, and no more structural layers to analyze. The universe has contracted into a singular, dark, and beautifully warm sanctuary where your soul is entirely at home. Your body now rests in a state of absolute, effortless surrender. The muscles have lost all memory of tension, feeling completely weightless yet deeply anchored in the soft, supportive embrace of your bed. The air in the room is perfectly still, holding a clean, gentle warmth that creates a protective barrier around your skin, keeping the cold of the external world light years away. Every slow, rhythmic inhalation is a drawing in of pure, quiet healing. Every long, soft exhalation is a complete release of the waking world. Imagine a soft, silent snowfall beginning to fall outside in the absolute dark, with large, heavy flakes drifting straight down through the windless air. Each snowflake is like a tiny fragment of silence, landing softly on the slate roofs and the cold cobblestones, burying the remaining noises, corners, and shapes of the world under a thick velvet blanket of white peace. Inside your room, this sense of soft, creeping isolation brings an exquisite feeling of comfort, a deep realization that you are completely tucked away, safe and entirely hidden from the demands of life. The mind has finally let go of its last fragile connection to the shore of consciousness. The thoughts that once demanded your attention are gone, leaving behind a vast, smooth expanse of peaceful dark. There are no more sentences to finish, no more memories to hold, and no more worries to untangle. Your mind is like a clear, starless night sky, deep, quiet, and beautiful in its absolute stillness, ready to welcome the soft, healing currents of a dreamless rest. Let yourself sink completely beneath the surface of this warm, dark ocean of peace. There is no urgency to return, no clock to watch, and no task to remember. The night is holding you with an incredible maternal gentleness, guaranteeing your safety and your warmth until the morning sun decides to rise. Trust the darkness, trust the quiet, and trust the perfect comfort of your bed. Close your eyes fully, let the final spark of awareness go out, and drift down into the deepest, most restorative sleep of your life. At this ultimate, unmeasurable depth of the night, the clock entirely loses its power over your world. The steady, quiet progression of time dissolves into a vast, motionless expanse of pure serenity, where there is no yesterday to look back upon and no tomorrow to prepare for. The long, atmospheric journey through the historical streets, the damp brick courts, the cold winter fogs, and the warm embers of the hearth has served its purpose perfectly, fading into a gentle, distant whisper that finally surrenders to the absolute majesty of total silence. Your room has become a perfect, unassailable sanctuary, a small pocket of existence that the noise and chaos of the external world can never hope to penetrate. Inside this space, the air remains beautifully calm, carrying a stable, comforting warmth that wraps around you like a heavy silk cloak. The physical boundary of your bed holds you with an unyielding, protective care, allowing your body to sink deeper and deeper into the mattress until you can no longer tell where you end, and the soft comfort of your bedding begins. Every breath you draw in now is a direct connection to the quiet energy of the sleeping earth. The inhales are slow, deep, and effortless, bringing a cool wave of absolute peace to your chest. The exhales are long, smooth, and gentle, releasing the final, invisible, microscopic dust of the day's awareness into the velvety dark. There is no longer any need to think, to perceive, or to maintain even the smallest thread of connection to the waking world. You are entirely permitted to let go, to dissolve, and to simply be. Imagine the darkness around you not as an emptiness, but as a rich, soothing substance, a soft, protective element designed specifically to heal your spirit and restore your strength. It fills every corner of the room, smoothing out the sharp edges of reality, softening the shadows and blanking out the busy imagery of the mind. Your consciousness has become like a perfectly still, dark mirror, reflecting nothing but the deep, quiet peace of the universe that surrounds you. Allow yourself to slip quietly over the final edge of awareness now. There are no more stories to follow, no more words to listen to, and no more concepts to understand. The fortress is secure, the heat is trapped, the dark is complete, and the universe is keeping watch over your safety. Let your mind drift down into the deepest dark currents of a beautiful, dreamless oblivion. You are warm, you are protected, and you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes fully, let the final light of consciousness fade to black, and drift away into a profound restorative sleep. In this quietest hour, the world reaches a state of perfect, crystalline equilibrium. The narrative of the past, the imagery of the brick walls, the winter chill, and the glowing hearths have all dissolved into a singular, warm feeling of total safety. There are no more transitions to make, no more memories to evoke, and no more paths to cross. Everything has slowed down to a beautiful, motionless frequency where the only reality is the absolute comfort of the present moment. Your body now rests in a state of deep, unshakable compliance with the dark. The mattress beneath you feels as though it is gently rising to meet your weight, cradling you so perfectly that all physical boundaries begin to blur. The air in your room is completely still. holding a soft, reliable warmth that creates an unbreakable shield against the outside world. With each slow, circular breath, you draw in the pure, restorative essence of the night, filling your lungs with a deep, cooling sense of absolute peace. Imagine your last remaining thoughts as a single tiny flame on a candle that has burned faithfully throughout the evening. Now, a soft, gentle breath of wind from the quiet night touches the wick. The flame flickers once, twice, and then goes out entirely, leaving only a thin, beautiful ribbon of grey smoke that curls lazily into the warm air before dissolving into the velvet darkness. The light is gone, the heat remains, and the mind is finally left in a state of pure, undisturbed and beautiful blankness. There is a magnificent, sacred freedom in this level of emptiness. You are no longer required to hold on to your name, your tasks, your worries, or your history. You are simply a living being, wrapped in the safety of a secure sanctuary, allowing the natural, ancient currents of sleep to take full control of your awareness. The world outside is frozen in time, the future is an abstract concept, and the darkness around you is a loyal friend that promises nothing but rest. Let yourself sink completely into the dark, quiet river of sleep that is rising to carry you away. Do not look back at the shore of the waking world, and do not try to catch the floating fragments of this story. You are safe, you are boundlessly warm. You are entirely protected by the silence of your room. Allow the final thread of awareness to loosen and fade to black. Close your eyes to the very center of the quiet night. Let your spirit drift down without a single care and surrender entirely to a deep, beautiful and healing sleep. At this ultimate, unalterable coordinate of the night, the world achieves its most perfect and final state of stillness. The journey through the historical streets, the small brick houses, the glowing hearths, and the heavy winter fogs has completed its circle, leaving behind a pure, concentrated essence of total security. The narrative has done its work, the images have softened into a uniform, dark velvet background, and the conscious mind is now completely unburdened by the need to follow, to understand, or to interpret. Your physical frame has settled into a deep, heavy state of absolute surrender. Every joint, every muscle, and every single fibre of your being has let go of its final defensive anchor, allowing the bed beneath you to take full responsibility for your weight. The warmth enclosed within your blankets has become a permanent, self-sustaining climate, a gentle, dry oasis of comfort that completely repels the cold, unpredictable currents of the outside world. You are completely enclosed, completely insulated, and completely safe. Imagine your consciousness as a single soft feather that has been drifting lazily downward through a vast, quiet sky for hours. Now finally it touches the soft, unmoving ground. The movement stops. The drifting is over. There are no more air currents to carry it, no more heights to maintain, and no more journeys to complete. It simply rests perfectly still, integrated entirely into the peaceful landscape of the dark, silent night. The space inside your mind is now beautifully blank, a wide and calm horizon where the busy frequencies of the day can no longer exist. There are no sentences left to formulate, no memories left to organize, and no future tasks left to calculate. The room is perfectly quiet, the darkness is incredibly soft, and the house stands as a loyal, unbreakable fortress around your body, maintaining your peace while you step away from the waking world. Allow yourself to slip quietly over the final, invisible edge of awareness. Let the rising tide of deep, heavy sleep carry you away from the shore of consciousness, drifting down into the wonderful healing depths of a dreamless oblivion. You have done enough. You have arrived. There is nothing left to hold on to, and nothing left to do but sleep. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the dark. Let your breath slow to its final, quietest rhythm, and surrender fully to a beautiful, profound rest. In this quietest, most sacred interval of the night, all distinctions between the past, the present, and the future dissolve into a single seamless reality of absolute peace. The story of the old industrial town, the brick terraces, and the stubborn warmth of the fires has served its ultimate purpose. softly stepping into the background and leaving you at the very center of an unbroken stillness. There are no more words to listen to, no more scenes to imagine, and no more thoughts to guide. The silence itself has become the narrative, whispering a gentle, wordless song of deep recovery. Your body has now achieved a state of profound, weightless integration with your bed. It feels as though every remaining molecule of tension has been gently drawn out, leaving you floating in a warm, dark vacuum of pure comfort. The air you breathe is perfectly temperate, holding the clean, silent quality of a room that is entirely dedicated to your safety. Within this protective cocoon, you are completely insulated from the turning of the earth and the passage of the hours. Imagine your mind as an empty, sunless valley after a long day, where the shadows have lengthened so much that they have swallowed every sharp edge and every distinct shadow. There is no wind to rustle the leaves, no light to cast a reflection, and no movement to disturb the perfect, beautiful blankness. The busy workshop of your consciousness has been completely vacuumed and locked for the night, leaving behind a wide, dark canvas that is entirely at rest, untouched by the memories of yesterday or the shadows of tomorrow. This is the state of total, unreserved surrender. You no longer need to maintain an identity, to remember a schedule, or to guard your own thoughts. The walls around you are solid, the roof above you is secure, and the darkness is a loyal guardian that has completely sealed out the world. You are permitted to simply exist as a single calm point of awareness, drifting slowly and effortlessly into the waiting arms of the subconscious. Let yourself glide over the final invisible boundary of the waking world. Do not try to catch the meaning of these words, and do not try to stay on the surface of thought. Allow the heavy magnetic current of a deep, dreamless sleep to submerge you fully, carrying you down into the beautiful dark depths of total oblivion. You are perfectly warm, you are boundlessly protected, and you are entirely at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest core of the silent night. Let go of the final thread and drift away into a profound, healing sleep. At this ultimate quiet boundary of the dark, the world has completed its slow deceleration, coming to a total and perfect halt. The heavy brick terraces, the cold cobblestones, the mist over the industrial rivers, and the modern world outside have all faded into a singular, vast cloud of quiet neutrality. There are no more reference points, no more memories to anchor your awareness, and no more structures to map out. The journey through time has brought you to the edge of an infinite, peaceful void where nothing is required but total release. Your physical form has now become entirely passive, sinking with a wonderful restorative density into the supportive depths of your bed. The heavy blankets wrap around your shoulders and torso like a gentle, warm seal, trapping a perfect, unchanging climate of pure comfort that completely insulates you from the external universe. Every breath you take is a smooth, continuous loop, a soft intake of the room's absolute stillness, and a long, slow release that carries away the very last microscopic fragments of your day's identity. Imagine your remaining awareness as the final page of a long, beautiful book that has been read to you throughout the night. Now, the final line has been spoken, the last word has been heard, and the heavy leather cover is slowly and gently closed. The story is finished. The knowledge is safely stored, and the book is laid upon the shelf in the dark. There is no longer any need to turn a page, to follow a line, or to remember a name. The room is dark, the book is still, and the mind is completely empty. There is an incredible, profound safety in this absolute blankness. You are no longer navigating, processing, or enduring. The fortress of your room stands perfectly secure, its walls holding back the night, its roof keeping out the sky, and its environment dedicated entirely to the preservation of your rest. The universe has taken over all your responsibilities, allowing you to completely dissolve your connection to the waking world without a single worry or regret. Allow yourself to fully let go of the final fragile thread of consciousness. Let the heavy magnetic tide of total oblivion wash over your mind, pulling you down gently and effortlessly into the deep, quiet, and beautiful spaces of a dreamless sleep. There are no more sights to see, no more sounds to hear, and no more thoughts to think. You are safe, you are warm, and you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the quiet night. Surrender your spirit to the dark, and drift away into a perfect healing rest. As the night deepens to its absolute threshold, the external universe continues to recede, moving so far away that it becomes nothing more than a faint, forgotten dream. The historical journey through the cold brick courts, the smoke-tinged air of the old industrial towns, and the comforting security of the open hearths has dissolved entirely into your subconscious. Those images have done their work, laying a foundation of absolute safety beneath your mind, and now they quietly step aside, leaving you in a state of pure, unadulterated stillness. Your body has reached a point of perfect, heavy equilibrium with the bed. Every muscle, from the small expressions on your face to the deep fibers of your shoulders and back, has completely surrendered its function. You are no longer holding yourself up, you are being held. The heavy protective layers of your blankets have created a permanent sanctuary of warmth around you, a gentle, reliable climate that keeps the cold of the outer world light years away. Every slow, circular breath you take draws in the pure, quiet restoration of the room. Imagine your mind as a smooth, dark mirror that has been reflecting the shapes and lights of the world all day long. Now, the lights have been turned off and the shapes have walked away. The surface of the mirror is completely dark, completely still, and completely empty. It no longer has to reflect anything, analyze anything, or hold on to any images. It is simply a quiet, beautiful expanse of peace, mirroring only the deep, velvety dark of the midnight hours. There is a profound, sacred freedom in this absolute blankness. In this space, you are completely released from the grid of time, identities, and expectations. You do not have to be a thinker, a worker, or a planner. You are merely a living being, safe in your shelter, resting in the absolute certainty that the world will take care of itself while you are away. The fortress of your room is solid, the air is calm, and the night is acting as a loyal guardian at your door. Let yourself slip quietly over the very last edge of conscious awareness. Do not try to capture the meaning of these words, and do not try to remain on the surface of thought. Allow the heavy, magnetic tide of deep, dreamless sleep to submerge you fully, carrying you down into the beautiful, dark depths of total oblivion. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly protected by the silence. Close your eyes to the deepest core of the quiet night. Let go of the final thread, and drift away into a perfect healing rest. In this ultimate, unalterable coordinate of the deep night, the final bridge to the waking world quietly dissolves, leaving your mind floating in a state of pure, weightless infinity. The story of the ancient brick terraces, the damp winter fogs, and the glowing embers of the past has finished its long, comforting whisper. Those images have dissolved into the deep foundation of your subconscious, leaving behind a magnificent, heavy inheritance of absolute peace. There are no more journeys to calculate, no more timelines to follow, and no more structural layers to perceive. Your physical being has settled into a state of total, unshakable passivity. It feels as though the very concept of weight has vanished, replaced by a deep, melting integration with the soft, supportive matrix of your bed. The air in your room remains beautifully still, holding a stable, protective warmth that acts as an unbreakable shield between your skin and the external universe. Within this perfect cocoon of blankets, you are entirely insulated, entirely anchored, and completely untouchable by the cold or the cares of the world. Imagine your consciousness as a single tiny grain of stardust floating in the quiet, warm expanses of a peaceful universe. There are no winds to push it, no gravitational pulls to resist, and no destinations it must reach. It simply hovers, weightless and free, surrounded on all sides by a deep, velvety darkness that feels incredibly gentle, loving, and safe. The busy workshop of your mind has completely closed its doors. The tools are put away, the lights are dimmed to total blackness, and the internal space is beautifully empty. There is a profound, sacred grace in this level of absolute surrender. You are no longer required to maintain an identity, to recall a schedule, or to guard your own thoughts. The fortress of your shelter stands perfectly secure, its walls holding back the night, its environment dedicated entirely to the restoration of your spirit. The universe has taken over all your responsibilities, granting you total, unconditional permission to step away from the stream of time. Allow yourself to slip quietly over the very final edge of awareness. Let the rising heavy tide of total oblivion wash over your mind, pulling you down gently and effortlessly into the deep, dark and beautiful spaces of a dreamless sleep. There are no more words to hear, no more thoughts to think, and no more sights to see. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the quiet night, let go of the final thread of the world, and drift away into a perfect eternal rest. At this pristine and untouched coordinate of the midnight hours, the final echoes of all earthly frequencies have officially ceased. The historical landscape, the rows of brick cottages, the comforting scent of wood smoke, and the damp winter streets have all completed their narrative cycle, receding into the deep, quiet corners of your memory. They have successfully delivered you to this sacred place of absolute, unshakable sanctuary, and now they step aside, leaving you alone with the pure, beautiful essence of complete and total rest. Your physical body has achieved an exquisite, absolute state of relaxation. It is a deep, comforting density that feels entirely natural, as though every muscle, bone, and nerve has finally remembered how to completely give up its weight. The mattress below supports you with an unwavering strength, while the heavy, thick blankets wrap around your form like a gentle cocoon, preserving a flawless, warm microclimate that guards you against the cool, quiet air of the outer room. You are entirely protected, entirely anchored, and entirely safe. Imagine your consciousness as a beautiful, grand old house in the middle of a silent forest, one by one throughout the evening. The lights in each room have been gently turned off. The downstairs hallway is dark, the library is quiet, the small lamps in the windows have been extinguished. Now, the final candle in the highest room is softly blown out. The house remains warm, solid, and secure, but the lights are completely gone, leaving the structure to rest in the peaceful, restorative embrace of the natural night. There is no longer any need to watch, to evaluate, or to keep track of the passing moments. You are entirely disconnected from the grid of time, responsibilities, and roles. In this quiet dark, you do not have to plan for tomorrow, nor do you have to process the events of yesterday. The world outside has been paused, its demands have been silenced at the threshold of your door, and your only remaining task is to allow the beautiful ancient mechanisms of deep sleep to rebuild your energy. Let yourself slip effortlessly over the very last edge of waking thought. Do not try to hold on to the meaning of these sentences, and do not try to maintain a connection to the conscious world. Allow the heavy, magnetic tide of total oblivion to wash over you, lifting your spirit and carrying it down into the dark, quiet, and boundless ocean of a dreamless rest. You are safe. You are warm. You are entirely at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the shadow, let your breath fade to a whisper, and drift away into a perfect night's sleep. At this incredibly deep, suspended threshold of the midnight journey, the last remaining boundaries of the waking mind are softly and beautifully dissolving. The historical journey through the brick courts, the cold winter fogs, and the glowing embers of the open hearths has now fully integrated into the deepest layers of your subconscious. Those comfort-filled images have laid down an unbreakable foundation of absolute security, and now they quietly melt into the background, leaving you resting in a state of pure, boundless tranquility. Your physical frame has attained a state of perfect, heavy compliance with the law of total rest. It feels as though the mattress beneath you has opened up to receive your weight, cradling your body so perfectly that the sensation of having physical limits begins to fade away. The air in the room is completely motionless, carrying a stable, nurturing warmth within your cocoon of heavy blankets that keeps the external world millions of miles away. You are completely insulated, completely anchored and entirely safe. Imagine your last conscious thoughts as the very final tiny ripples on the surface of a secluded mountain lake after a long, windy day. The wind has completely died down now, leaving the night air perfectly still. One by one, those tiny ripples smooth out, stretching across the water until the surface becomes a flawless dark mirror, reflecting nothing but the deep, quiet expanse of a starless sky. There is no more movement, no more distortion, and no more processing. The lake is perfectly flat, perfectly still, and perfectly at peace. In this beautiful blankness, you are entirely released from the grid of time, schedules, and identities. You no longer have to be a thinker, a coordinator, or an observer. The fortress of your room stands strong and secure, its walls holding back the night, its environment dedicated completely to the preservation and restoration of your spirit. The universe has willingly taken over all of your responsibilities, granting you unconditional permission to step entirely out of the stream of time. Allow yourself to slip quietly over the very final edge of awareness now. There are no more stories to track, no more words to interpret, and no more concepts to hold on to. Let the heavy magnetic tide of total oblivion wash over your mind, pulling you down gently and effortlessly into the deep, dark, and beautiful spaces of a dreamless sleep. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the quiet night. Let go of the final thread, and drift away into a perfect, eternal rest. Now at this absolute and unmovable center of the night, the world has reached its final, perfect state of subtraction. Every historical echo of the cold brick terraces, the damp winter air, and the glowing embers has successfully faded into the deep soil of your subconscious. The modern world outside, with its endless signals, demands, and structures, has lost all its gravity. It cannot cross the threshold of this room. You are resting in a zone of pure neutral peace, where the mind is completely untethered from the necessity of being awake. Your physical body has achieved a wonderful, restorative density, sinking so completely into the mattress that it feels entirely integrated with the bed. Every single muscle fiber from your forehead down to your toes has completely surrendered, letting go of the last invisible microscopic anchor of alertness. The blankets draped over you maintain a steady, comforting ecosystem of dry, natural warmth, a gentle fortress of cloth that seals out the cool, quiet air of the room. You are completely enclosed, completely anchored, and entirely safe. Imagine your awareness as a single clear drop of dew resting on the edge of a leaf above a vast, perfectly still ocean in the middle of a starless night. Gently, without any wind or effort, the drop lets go. It falls through the dark air, down and down until it meets the surface of the silent water. There is no splash, no ripple, and no sound. The drop simply dissolves into the infinite deep dark of the ocean, becoming one with the immense calm body of water. The separation is gone. The stillness is absolute. In this deep sanctuary, your mind is finally and beautifully blank. There are no more sentences to complete, no more memories to decode, and no more tomorrows to arrange. The internal landscape has become completely smooth, like a field of soft dark velvet stretching out into infinity. The fortress of your house is standing guard, the air is perfectly calm, and the night has wrapped its giant protective arms around your entire existence, ensuring your total isolation from all cares. Allow yourself to glide quietly over the final, remaining edge of conscious thought. Do not try to hold on to these words, and do not try to watch the darkness. Let the heavy, magnetic current of a deep, dreamless sleep take absolute control of your spirit, pulling you down into the beautiful, healing depths of total oblivion. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the very center of the quiet night. Let the final spark of awareness go out and drift away into a profound restorative sleep. At this exquisite, untroubled depth of the midnight hours, the final line of division between your inner world and the peaceful dark has completely vanished. The historical odyssey through the brick-lined lanes, the ancient coal fires, and the heavy winter mogs has fulfilled its sacred promise. leaving behind a pure, unshakable monument of total safety. The external universe has receded so far into the background that it is no longer even a memory. It is merely an abstract concept that has no power over this room, this bed, or this moment. Your physical form has reached an absolute breathtaking state of stillness. The heavy blankets above you provide a flawless, unchanging shield of warmth, creating a small, private ecosystem of perfect comfort that guards you against the cool, resting air of the room. Every breath you take has slowed to an effortless, natural whisper, a rhythmic, gentle wave that mimics the slow, deep pulse of the earth itself. You are no longer trying to relax. You have become relaxation itself, anchored completely in the sanctuary of your bed. Imagine your remaining awareness as a thin, elegant ribbon of silk lifting gently on a warm, completely windless air current inside a dark room. There are no sudden movements, no sharp edges, and no forces trying to pull it down. It simply hovers, entirely weightless, soft and flexible, dissolving its boundaries until it feels indistinguishable from the warm, protective air that surrounds it. The busy rooms of your intellect are now entirely empty. The corridors are quiet, and the final switch has been gently thrown, leaving the mind in a state of beautiful, dark serenity. There is a magnificent, comforting grace in this level of absolute emptiness. You have no identity to protect tonight, no tasks to manage, and no schedules to respect. The fortress of your home stands strong, its walls blocking out the weather, its roof holding back the sky, and its environment dedicated entirely to the deep restoration of your spirit. The universe has taken the wheel, allowing you to completely disembark from the train of conscious thought without a single worry. Allow yourself to slip quietly and permanently over the final edge of awareness now. Do not try to hold on to the sound of these words, and do not try to track the passage of time. Let the heavy magnetic tide of total oblivion submerge your mind completely, carrying you down into the deep, dark and beautiful spaces of a dreamless sleep. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest core of the silent night. Let go of the final thread and drift away into a perfect healing rest. At this grand, unmoving apex of the deep night, the final boundaries of human alertness have softly surrendered to the dark. The atmospheric journey through the brick courts, the cold winter fogs, and the warm, protective hearths of the past has completed its destination, dissolving quietly into the deep lake of your subconscious. There are no more landmarks to identify, no more histories to trace, and no more structural layers to examine. Everything has narrowed down to a singular, beautiful point of absolute, undisturbed neutrality. Your physical body has reached a state of deep, heavy compliance with the law of total rest. It feels as though your weight has been perfectly distributed across the mattress, leaving you with a wonderful sensation of floating in a warm, dark space where gravity no longer applies. The climate beneath your heavy blankets is stable, dry, and profoundly comforting, a gentle shield of warmth that keeps the entire external universe light years away. You are completely insulated, completely anchored, and entirely safe. Imagine your last remaining fragments of awareness as a small drop of dark ink falling into a large vessel of perfectly still, dark water. As it touches the surface, it does not create a disturbance. Instead, it gently opens, spreading outward in soft, lazy plumes until it integrates completely with the water around it. The drop is no longer a separate thing. It has vanished into the vast, dark infinity of the vessel. In the same way, your thoughts have dissolved into the velvet silence of the room, leaving your mind beautifully blank. There is a magnificent, sacred freedom in this level of absolute emptiness. You are no longer required to carry a name, a role, a history, or a plan. The fortress of your room stands perfectly secure, its walls holding back the night, its environment dedicated entirely to the preservation and restoration of your spirit. The universe has willingly taken over all your worldly responsibilities, granting you unconditional, absolute permission to step completely out of the stream of time. Allow yourself to slip quietly over the very final edge of waking thought. Do not try to hold on to the meaning of these words, and do not try to look into the darkness. Let the heavy magnetic tide of total oblivion wash over your mind, pulling you down gently and effortlessly into the deep, dark and beautiful spaces of a dreamless sleep. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the quiet night. Let go of the final thread and drift away into a perfect, healing rest. At this ultimate, untouched meridian of the silent night, the world has achieved a state of complete, unalterable stillness. The long atmospheric chronicle of the old brick terraces, the cold winter mist, the industrial rivers, and the glowing embers of the hearths has fully completed its purpose. Every single image has turned into a soft, dark velvet background, releasing your mind from the need to follow, to process, or to remember. There are no more distances left to bridge, no more words left to interpret, and no more thoughts left to anchor. Your body has reached a state of profound, heavy passivity that feels entirely natural and deeply healing. Every single nerve, every muscle fiber, and every joint has let go of its last microscopic defensive hold, allowing you to sink with a wonderful weight into the soft, supportive embrace of your mattress. The temperature within your heavy blankets remains perfectly stable, a warm, nurturing cocoon that seals you away completely from the turning of the earth and the passage of the hours. You are entirely protected, entirely hidden, and entirely safe. Imagine your last remaining thread of awareness as a faint, delicate wisp of cloud floating in a vast, dark night sky. As the minutes slow down to an absolute stop, the cloud gently expands, softening its edges, growing more and more translucent until it melts completely into the immense warm depth of the starless heavens. There is no line where the cloud ends and the sky begins. Everything has dissolved into a single beautiful expanse of absolute dreamless blankness. The workshop of the mind is dark, the doors are locked, and the silence is complete. In this deep sanctuary, you are officially free from the grid of time, identities, and expectations. You do not have to think, you do not have to maintain a narrative, and you do not have to prepare for tomorrow. The fortress of your room stands perfectly secure, its solid walls holding back the external world, its dark atmosphere acting as a loyal guardian over your sleep. The universe has taken full responsibility for everything outside this room, giving you total, unconditional permission to surrender completely. Allow yourself to glide quietly over the final, invisible boundary of the waking world. Do not try to catch the meaning of these words, and do not try to hold on to the surface of consciousness. Let the heavy magnetic tide of total oblivion submerge your mind, carrying you down effortlessly into the deep, quiet, and beautiful spaces of a profound rest. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the shadow, let your breath slow to its quietest rhythm, and drift away into an unbroken healing sleep. At this final, unshakable sanctuary of the late night hours, the world has quietly completed its ultimate reduction. The historical textures of the brick-lined courts, the soot-stained chimneys, the damp winter air, and the glowing coals of the open hearths have all dissolved into a singular, warm feeling of total oblivion. There are no more coordinates to track, no more timelines to cross, and no more structural layers to analyze. The universe has contracted into this one dark, beautifully warm room where your spirit is entirely at peace. Your body now rests in a state of absolute heavy surrender to the bed. Every muscle has lost its memory of movement, feeling completely weightless yet deeply anchored in the supportive embrace of your mattress. The air around you is perfectly still, holding a stable, gentle warmth that forms an unbreakable barrier against the cold of the external world. Every slow, rhythmic inhalation is a drawing in of pure, silent healing. Every long, soft exhalation is a complete, effortless release of the last remnants of the waking day. Imagine your last fleeting thoughts as a soft, distant echo of a bell that rang hours ago in the heart of the old town. The sound has travelled through the heavy fog, growing softer and fainter with every passing mile, until now, at this exact moment, it finally fades away into absolute nothingness. There is no vibration left, no lingering hum, and no trace of its path. The silence that follows is total, immense, and incredibly beautiful, filling every corner of your mind with an exquisite, dark stillness. The mind has finally let go of its last connection to the shore of consciousness. The thoughts that once demanded your energy have turned into a vast, smooth expanse of peaceful dark. There are no more sentences to finish, no more memories to hold, and no more worries to untangle. Your mind is like a clear, starless night sky, deep, quiet, and perfect in its absolute empty space, ready to welcome the soft healing currents of a deep, dreamless rest. Let yourself sink completely beneath the surface of this warm, dark ocean of peace. There is no urgency to return, no clock to watch, and no task to remember. The night is holding you with an incredible protective gentleness, guaranteeing your safety and your warmth until the morning decide to come. Trust the darkness, trust the quiet, and trust the perfect comfort of your bed. Close your eyes fully, let the final spark of awareness go out and drift down into the deepest, most restorative sleep of your life. At this ultimate, pristine coordinate of the endless night, the final remaining vibrations of the waking world have completely leveled out into a flat, motionless plane of absolute silence. The long, atmospheric pilgrimage through the old brick terraces, the cold winter fogs, the mist-laden canals, and the glowing embers of the hearth fires has fulfilled its purpose down to the last microscopic detail. The narrative has stepped away, leaving behind no thoughts, no questions, and no memories, only a deep, heavy, and majestic sense of total, unassailable security. Your physical body has reached a state of deep, permanent integration with the mattress. It is as though the very concept of physical boundaries has been erased, allowing you to melt effortlessly into the warm, supportive contours of your bed. The air in your room remains beautifully still, holding a stable, dry warmth within the heavy layers of your blankets that acts as an impenetrable shield against the turning of the earth. You are entirely enclosed, entirely anchored, and completely hidden from the stream of time. Imagine your last fading spark of awareness as a tiny drop of winter rain falling softly upon a thick, deep bed of green moss in a dark forest. It does not hit with a sound, it does not shatter or splash. The moment it touches the moss, it is instantly, quietly absorbed into the soft velvet texture, becoming one with the deep, silent earth beneath. There is no trace of its arrival, no ripple left behind, and no separation. The forest is still, the darkness is complete, and your mind is beautifully, flawlessly empty. There is a profound, sacred grace in this level of absolute surrender. In this dark oasis, you are completely stripped of your names, your titles, your duties, and your histories. You do not have to plan, you do not have to remember, and you do not have to hold on to any anchors of reality. The fortress of your room is unyielding, its walls keeping out the noise of the universe, its dark atmosphere serving as a loyal sentinel over your breathing. You are permitted to simply exist as a quiet, resting presence. Allow yourself to glide effortlessly over the very last invisible edge of consciousness now. Do not try to catch the meaning of these words, and do not try to track the slowing rhythm of the room. Let the heavy, magnetic current of a deep, dreamless oblivion submerge your mind entirely, pulling you down into the beautiful healing currents of a profound rest. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly protected by the silence. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the shadow, let the final light fade to black, and drift away into a perfect sleep. At this deepest unmappable valley of the midnight hours, the final thread linking your mind to the waking world stretches thin, softens and quietly parts. The grand, slow-moving tapestry of the old brick towns, the winter fogs, the cobbled alleys and the glowing iron hearths has faded into a vast, silent ocean of complete neutrality. There are no more scenes to construct, no more sensory details to capture, and no more steps to take. The story has dissolved into its ultimate form, an absolute, enveloping field of pure, unconditional safety. Your physical frame has now settled into a state of heavy, unbreakable compliance with the bed. It feels as though every muscle fibre, from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, has turned into soft, warm clay, perfectly moulded into the protective contours of your mattress. The environment within your blankets is a permanent, unchanging sanctuary, a dry, gentle warmth that completely seals your body away from the passage of time and the motion of the earth. You are entirely insulated, entirely anchored, and completely untouchable. Imagine your last remaining fragment of conscious thought as a solitary golden maple leaf that has held on to the highest branch of a tree through the long winter evening. Now the wind has completely died away, leaving the air perfectly still. Without a sound, the leaf lets go. It drifts through the dark, silent air, tumbling slowly, weightlessly, until it settles flat upon a thick blanket of soft, fresh snow. The movement stops, the journey is over, there is no more resistance, no more suspension, and no more waiting. The leaf rests, integrated perfectly into the quiet, dark landscape of the night. The space within your mind is now beautifully, flawlessly blank. The internal workshop has been closed, the tools of logic and memory have been carefully packed away, and the final lights have been extinguished. There are no more schedules to calculate, no more identities to maintain, and no more names to remember. You are no longer an observer of the night. You have become a part of the night itself, a calm, breathing presence resting securely within the solid, unyielding fortress of your room. Allow yourself to slip quietly and permanently over the final, invisible threshold of awareness. Do not try to hold on to the rhythm of these words, and do not try to watch the velvet darkness around you. Let the heavy, magnetic tide of total oblivion submerge your mind completely, carrying you down effortlessly into the deep, quiet, and beautiful spaces of a dreamless rest. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest core of the silent night. Let go of the final anchor and drift away into a perfect healing sleep. At this ultimate, unalterable pinnacle of the midnight hours, the universe has finalized its slow, majestic subtraction. The great historical chronicle of the old brick terraces, the cold winter fogs, the mist-laden canals, and the glowing embers of the open hearths has officially completed its work, leaving behind a pure, concentrated essence of absolute, unassailable security. The conscious mind is now completely unburdened by the need to follow, to process, or to interpret. Every structure has melted away, leaving you at the very center of an infinite, peaceful void. Your physical frame has achieved an absolute, breathtaking state of stillness. Every joint, every muscle, and every single fiber of your being has let go of its final defensive anchor, allowing the mattress beneath you to take full responsibility for your weight. The warmth enclosed within your blankets has become a permanent, self-sustaining climate, a gentle, dry oasis of comfort that completely repels the cold, unpredictable currents of the outside world. You are completely enclosed, completely insulated, and completely safe. Imagine your last remaining thread of awareness as a faint, delicate wisp of incense smoke rising inside a dark, perfectly sealed room. There are no drafts to disturb it, no open windows to scatter it, and no currents to force its direction. It simply climbs slowly, expanding softly into the quiet space, growing lighter and more transparent with every passing second, until it melts completely into the warm, velvety air of the room. There is no line where the smoke ends and the room begins. Everything has dissolved into a single beautiful expanse of absolute dreamless blankness. The space inside your mind is now beautifully blank, a wide and calm horizon where the busy frequencies of the day can no longer exist. There are no sentences left to formulate, no memories left to organize, and no future tasks left to calculate. The room is perfectly quiet. The darkness is incredibly soft, and the house stands as a loyal, unbreakable fortress around your body, maintaining your peace while you step away from the waking world. Allow yourself to slip quietly over the final, invisible edge of awareness. Now let the rising tide of deep, heavy sleep carry you away from the shore of consciousness, drifting down into the wonderful, healing depths of a dreamless oblivion. You have done enough. You have arrived. There is nothing left to hold on to, and nothing left to do but sleep. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the dark. Let your breath slow to its final, quietest rhythm, and surrender fully to a beautiful, profound rest. At this ultimate, untouched depth of the silent night, the final boundaries between your awareness and the dark universe have completely evaporated. The long, evocative journey through the cold brick terraces, the mist-veiled industrial rivers, and the comforting, stubborn warmth of the coal fires has fully retreated into the deep soil of your subconscious. The narrative has done its beautiful work, leaving behind no images, no words, and no thoughts, only a vast, heavy, and majestic monument of absolute, unassailable security. Your physical body has now achieved an exquisite, absolute state of relaxation that feels entirely natural. Every muscle fiber, from the tiny expressions around your eyes to the deep core of your back and shoulders, has completely given up its function, melting into the soft, supportive matrix of your mattress. The temperature within your heavy blankets remains perfectly stable, a warm, nurturing cocoon that seals you away completely from the turning of the earth and the passage of the hours. You are entirely protected, entirely hidden, and entirely safe. Imagine your last remaining thread of waking consciousness as a single perfect snowflake falling through the dark, windless air of a silent winter forest. It tumbles slowly, weightlessly, without any rush or resistance, until it gently touches the soft white blanket of the ground. There is no sound upon its arrival, no impact and no disruption. It simply blends into the infinite softness of the earth, becoming one with the landscape, leaving the forest in a state of absolute undisturbed stillness. The workshop of your mind is completely dark. The doors are locked, and the silence is beautiful. In this deep sanctuary, you are officially free from the grid of time, identities, and expectations. You do not have to think, you do not have to maintain a name, and you do not have to prepare for tomorrow. The fortress of your room stands perfectly secure, its solid walls holding back the external world, its dark atmosphere acting as a loyal guardian over your breathing. The universe has taken full responsibility for everything outside this room, giving you total, unconditional permission to surrender completely. Allow yourself to glide quietly over the final, invisible boundary of the waking world. Do not try to catch the meaning of these words, and do not try to hold on to the surface of thought. Let the heavy, magnetic tide of total oblivion submerge your mind, carrying you down effortlessly into the deep, quiet, and beautiful spaces of a profound rest. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the shadow. Let your breath slow to its quietest rhythm and drift away into an unbroken, healing sleep. At this exquisite, untroubled meridian of the late night hours, the world has completed its final, perfect subtraction. The atmospheric chronicle of the ancient brick lanes, the cold winter fogs, and the glowing iron hearths has successfully transitioned from a story into a deep, permanent feeling of total safety inside your subconscious. There are no more landmarks to map out, no more timelines to follow, and no more structural layers to perceive. The universe has contracted into this single, dark, and beautifully warm room where nothing is required of you. Your physical form has now settled into a state of heavy, unshakable passivity. Every muscle, from the small expressions on your face to the deep fibers of your shoulders and legs, has completely surrendered its weight to the bed. The heavy, protective layers of your blankets maintain a flawless, unchanging climate of pure comfort, a gentle, reliable barrier that seals out the cool, quiet air of the room. Every breath you take is a smooth, continuous loop, drawing in the absolute stillness of the night and releasing the last microscopic fragments of the day. Imagine your remaining awareness as a small wooden boat that has been sailing across a vast ocean all day long. Now the boat has entered a perfectly sheltered, landlocked bay in the middle of a starless night. The sails are lowered, the oars are put away, and the heavy iron anchor is gently dropped into the deep, dark water. The boat floats completely motionless upon the dark mirror of the bay. There are no waves to rock it, no currents to drift it, and no winds to push it. It is safe, it is still, and its journey is completely finished. There is an incredible, profound safety in this absolute blankness. You are no longer navigating, processing, or enduring. The fortress of your room stands perfectly secure, its solid walls holding back the external universe, its dark environment dedicated entirely to the preservation of your rest. The world outside has been paused, its demands have been silenced at the threshold of your door, and your only remaining task is to allow the beautiful, ancient mechanisms of deep sleep to rebuild your energy. Allow yourself to fully let go of the final fragile thread of consciousness. Let the heavy magnetic tide of total oblivion wash over your mind, pulling you down gently and effortlessly into the deep, quiet, and beautiful spaces of a dreamless sleep. There are no more sights to see, no more sounds to hear, and no more thoughts to think. You are safe, you are warm, and you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the quiet night, surrender your spirit to the dark, and drift away into a perfect, healing rest. At this incredibly deep, suspended threshold of the midnight hours, the final line of division between your inner world and the peaceful dark has completely dissolved. The long, atmospheric journey through the old brick courts, the cold winter mist, and the comforting stubborn warmth of the open hearths has now fully integrated into the deepest layers of your subconscious. Those comfort-filled images have laid down an unbreakable foundation of absolute security, and now they quietly step aside, leaving you resting in a state of pure, boundless tranquility. Your physical frame has attained a state of perfect, heavy compliance with the law of total rest. It feels as though the mattress beneath you has opened up to receive your weight, cradling your body so perfectly that the sensation of having physical limits begins to fade away. The air in the room is completely motionless, carrying a stable, nurturing warmth within your cocoon of heavy blankets that keeps the external world light years away. You are completely insulated, completely anchored, and entirely safe. Imagine your last remaining fragments of awareness as a single musical note played on an ancient stringed instrument left to vibrate in a large, empty stone cathedral at midnight. The note does not end abruptly. Instead, it slowly expands, its sound growing softer, wider, and more distant with each passing second. It echoes gently against the high, dark arches, losing its sharp edges until it finally fades into the grand, velvety silence of the hall. There is no lingering hum, no leftover vibration, and no trace of its path. The silence that follows is immense, beautiful, and absolute. In this deep sanctuary, your mind is finally and beautifully blank. There are no more sentences to complete, no more memories to decode, and no more tomorrows to arrange. The internal landscape has become completely smooth, like a field of soft, dark velvet stretching out into infinity. The fortress of your house is standing guard, the air is perfectly calm, and the night has wrapped its giant, protective arms around your entire existence, ensuring your total isolation from all cares. Allow yourself to glide quietly over the final remaining edge of conscious thought. Do not try to hold on to these words, and do not try to watch the darkness. Let the heavy magnetic current of a deep, dreamless sleep take absolute control of your spirit, pulling you down into the beautiful healing depths of total oblivion. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the very center of the quiet night. Let the final spark of awareness go out and drift away into a profound restorative sleep. At this profound, immutable coordinate of the deep night, the waking world has surrendered its very last structural line. The atmospheric memory of the old brick terraces, the damp winter air, the distant hum of the foggy river, and the glowing embers has finished its slow protective work. Those images have dissolved into the vast dark foundation of your subconscious, leaving behind an inheritance of absolute unshakable calm. There are no more coordinates to calculate, no more distances to measure, and no more timelines to keep. Your physical being has settled into an exquisite state of total dense passivity. Weight has ceased to feel like a burden. Instead, it has transformed into a comforting deep integration with the soft, welcoming matrix of your bed. The air in your room is completely motionless, maintaining a steady, protective warmth inside your heavy blankets that acts as an unbreakable barrier between your skin and the outer universe. Within this perfect cocoon, you are entirely insulated, entirely anchored, and completely untouchable. Imagine your last fading spark of awareness as a single soft feather drifting down through the warm, quiet dark of an immense empty room. There are no drafts to catch it, no sudden movements to disturb its path, and no hurry in its descent. It falls with a slow, beautiful weightlessness, drifting lower and lower, until it finally settles flat upon a deep cushion of black velvet. The moment it touches the surface, all movement ceases. There is no bounce, no vibration, and no lingering momentum. It simply rests, completely absorbed by the quiet luxury of the stillness. The internal workshop of your intellect has officially closed its doors for the night. The tools of logic are put away, the files of memory are locked, and the internal spaces are beautifully, flawlessly empty. You are no longer required to maintain an identity, to recall a name, or to safeguard your own thoughts. The fortress of your room stands perfectly secure, its solid walls holding back the night, its environment dedicated entirely to the restoration of your spirit. Allow yourself to slip quietly over the very final edge of conscious thought. Do not try to analyze these words, and do not try to trace the fading boundary of your mind. Let the rising heavy tide of total oblivion wash over your awareness, pulling you down gently and effortlessly into the deep, dark and beautiful spaces of a dreamless sleep. You are safe, you are warm, you are boundlessly at peace. Close your eyes to the deepest center of the quiet night. Let go of the final thread of the world and drift away into a perfect, eternal rest. Now the long, beautiful journey has finally reached its ultimate and absolute destination. The 54 chambers of comfort, history, texture, and silence have completed their sacred architecture. The old brick courts, the winter fogs, the glowing hearths, the dark rivers, the mountain lakes, and the infinite night skies have all woven together into one final, unbreakable shield of total, unassailable safety. They have delivered you to the very edge of the great void, and now they quietly fade into the eternal dark. The narrative is finished. The descriptions are over. The words themselves are ready to die away into the stillness. Your physical body is no longer a separate entity holding itself up in the world. It has completely, beautifully surrendered its existence to the bed. Every muscle, every nerve, every single cell has given up its last microscopic defense. The heavy, warm blankets hold you in a permanent, timeless sanctuary. You are perfectly warm. You are perfectly anchored. You are perfectly safe. There is nothing left to see. There is nothing left to hear. There is nothing left to process. The grand house of your consciousness is now entirely dark. The keys have been turned in the locks, the corridors are quiet, and the final candle has been softly blown out. The mind has completely unmoored itself from the shore of the waking world. You have no name tonight, you have no history. You have no tomorrow, and you have no yesterday. You are simply a quiet, breathing presence, melting into the infinite, gentle velvet of the universe. The world outside your fortress is paused forever. The universe has taken absolute responsibility for everything you leave behind. You are permitted to disappear into the quiet. You are permitted to let go of the very last thread. Listen to the silence that remains behind these words. It is a warm silence, a protective silence, an absolute silence. Let the heavy magnetic tide of total oblivion submerge you completely. Now sink down, down, into the deep, dark and beautiful ocean of a dreamless, endless rest. The journey is done. The sanctuary is complete. The night has claimed you with absolute love. Good night. Sleep now. Sleep. Deep, deep sleep. Sleepy History with Kevin is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes. The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation. Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study. By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep. Thank you for your understanding and support.